I caught my wife cheating during her writing seminar, hired a private investigator, got solid proof, then disappeared before she returned home. My name is Andrew Baker, though friends call me AB. Never Andy, but there's always some drunk idiot who thinks we're buddies and tries to call me Andy. They ask, "So, Andy, what do you do?" I usually answer with a made-up story about a fake device I invented that lets cops check someone's intoxication level from 12 meters away. They usually stop talking to me after that. I can't stand dishonesty or stupidity. Lie to me and things go downhill fast. In reality, I'm just a regular guy. I enjoy my simple life and I'm proud of my job. I'm an engineer at a large national company with offices across the country. I have a few close friends. I don't drink much, though sometimes I'll grab a beer with them. My biggest weakness? Nachos. If I don't watch myself, I gain weight fast, so I try to stay in decent shape for my age. I used to sail every chance I got, but once my wife and I had 2 daughters, free time disappeared. Eventually, I sold the boat. A fair trade. I wanted to spend more time with the people who mattered most. My wife Karen and I have been married for 25 years. She's an English teacher. Our daughters are both in college now. Claire is at Brown, and Denise studies up north as well. Thankfully, both earned impressive scholarships. We live in North Carolina, in the Research Triangle, surrounded by great universities and tech companies. It's a wonderful place to raise a family. I was a bit disappointed when the girls chose schools far up north, but I knew leaving the nest would help them grow. My daughters are incredible, smart, kind, funny, and grounded. I worry about them constantly, but trust their judgment. Watching them become independent meant that Karen and I finally had time alone again. I've been looking forward to this chapter, coming home to my wife, reconnecting, rediscovering each other. I imagined date nights, theater trips, almost like a second honeymoon. But reality didn't match my expectations. Looking back at our first year as empty nesters, I can see now that Karen had started to change. At first it was subtle, a shift in interests, new hobbies, more time away from home. I thought she was simply rediscovering herself now that the kids were grown. But gradually, I began noticing bigger changes in her priorities. Karen teaches creative writing and has always considered herself an almost writer. When the kids were younger, she barely had time to write. During summer, she worked on short stories and essays, but nothing significant ever came from it. She submitted pieces to literary magazines and collected a stack of rejections. I genuinely liked her writing, even if it was often dramatic and formulaic. I've long suspected that she loves the idea of being a writer more than the act itself. Throughout our marriage, she joined countless writing groups. Some were genuinely helpful. Others were more like little echo chambers where everyone complimented each other. The latest group, the one where everything fell apart, was a mix of both. Meetings rotated between members' homes. When they gathered at ours, I tried to stay out of the way. I attempted to join once, but Karen and a few others clearly didn't want me there, so I stopped trying. Her current group had about 10 members, men and women. Some of them I liked, others not at all. Half were forgettable, the rest were memorable in their own ways. Reggie, for example, wrote historical nonfiction and biographies. She actually did real research, and her books were academically solid, yet readable. Betty wrote whimsical fantasy stories with talking unicorns. Sweet woman, but she wrote purely for fun. Bill was the know-it-all of the group, annoying but otherwise harmless. And then there was Frank. From the moment I met him, something felt wrong. He introduced himself by asking, "So, Eddie, what do you do?" I shot Karen a look. She frowned slightly and shook her head. I simply said I was an engineer. He smiled, or maybe smirked. I had stopped attending their meetings, but when they met in our house, I usually stayed in the next room, listening without being noticed. It didn't take long for me to notice something off whenever Karen and Frank spoke. Inside jokes, a strange closeness, a tone in their voices that felt too familiar. Sometimes he encouraged her, Other times, he sounded like he knew exactly what she was thinking. He referenced conversations that none of the other group members remembered, conversations that clearly happened privately. It made my stomach twist. I confronted Karen once, but she brushed me off, as if I was imagining things. I didn't push it. After all these years, I know when she's already decided not to listen. But I couldn't ignore the feeling. Something in that group dynamic, and especially in Frank, was wrong.
During their meetings, once the writing discussions wound down, they would relax with a glass of wine. It was during one of those evenings that I realized how many of them were simply pretending to be something they weren't. It happened in early March, when the conversation shifted toward the true lifestyle of real authors. All famous writers were alcoholics, someone joked. They wrote in the mornings, drank in the evenings, and that's where the creativity came from. The booze loosened their minds and opened the door for new ideas. And real writers, Frank added, were always fueled by some hidden romance. That was what truly pushed them. Karen's response hit me like a punch to the stomach. Absolutely! It's the intensity, the thrill of secrecy. That's where the real inspiration lives. Some members chuckled, others stayed silent. I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than a joke, but I kept listening anyway. Maybe we should all have a night of passion, Bill said. Then everyone can write the next great American novel. I couldn't tell whether he was joking or not. They continued talking about booze and affairs among authors. I stayed quiet in the next room, listening through the open window. And then I caught the detail that made me freeze. Is anyone else applying to the writing seminar in Illinois this summer? Frank asked. Oh, I already applied. I really hope they accept me. 6 weeks focused entirely on writing and discussions with other authors? It could be huge for me. That was the first time I had heard about it. Frank jumped in right away. They'll take you. Your writing has improved so much this year. Honestly, I'm sure you'll get in. I applied too, but who knows? Every instinct in me was screaming. I didn't like what I was hearing, but at that moment, I still loved and trusted my wife. When you're married that long, trust becomes something automatic. You don't question your spouse's motives. You don't imagine betrayal. You simply believe your partner is on your side. And then one day, everything collapses and you realize that trust was a mistake. Update 1. As time passed, I let myself forget that overheard conversation. I fully trusted my wife. Young men may not understand this, but when you've been married for more than 25 years, trust becomes a habit as natural as breathing. It was late April. I had just finished working in the yard and headed into the house. As I approached the kitchen door, I heard Karen speaking on the phone. I can't wait. 6 whole weeks with no responsibilities, no obligations, and no one expecting me to come home. That last sentence froze me in place. These will be the most selfish 6 weeks of my life, she laughed. I deserve it, and so do you. None of it sounded right. I stepped inside. Karen nearly jumped when she saw me. Oh, gotta go. EB just came in. I need to start dinner, she said quickly, hanging up. Who was that? Just Reggie, talking about the end of the school year. I didn't buy it for a second. I wanted to ask her about what I'd overheard, especially the part about no one waiting for my return, but I knew she wouldn't tell me the truth that night. Later that evening, she came into the living room smiling widely. EB, you won't believe it! I got accepted into that writing seminar in Illinois. Remember the one I applied for? I remembered because I overheard it weeks earlier, not because she told me. It's 6 weeks long, she continued excitedly. University of Illinois, lectures, guest authors, workshops. It's an incredible opportunity. That's wonderful, I said. Maybe I could take some time off and come with you. I'd love to hear some of the speakers." Her reaction was immediate and telling. "Oh, well, we can talk about that. It's going to be very intense and I won't have much free time." My instincts lit up again. "I get the feeling you don't want me to come," I said. "That's not it at all. I just don't want you to be bored." In my head, I shouted the truth she refused to hear. "I'm not stupid." But out loud, I said nothing. That night, after she went to bed, I checked our phone logs online. AT&T keeps records of all calls and texts. Sitting in front of my computer, I scanned the history. The call I'd interrupted earlier wasn't from Reggie. It was from Frank. It's incredible how fast trust collapses after 25 years of marriage, how fast everything falls apart when you catch your wife lying and realize she wants you completely out of her plans. Weeks passed, and she became obsessed with preparing for the seminar. Every time I mentioned visiting her in Illinois, she brushed it off. Then the excuses turned into manipulation. "EB, I have amazing news. I bought you and Jake tickets for a fishing trip in northern Canada, late June. You two can finally catch those big brown trout you're always talking about." She said it with a bright smile, like she was doing me a favor. "Thank you," I replied, "but honestly, I'd rather spend that time with you." "EB, we already talked about this. It just doesn't make sense. I'll be working non-stop, and I'd feel guilty leaving you alone." I studied her face, trying to understand what I was seeing. It wasn't guilt, it was condescension. "I'm trying to smile," I said, but my instincts were clearing their throats. "You could at least try to smile," she snapped. "Those tickets were expensive." "Sure, it'll be fun." I went down to the basement for the rest of the evening. Our house is old, and there's a floor vent in the hallway where warm air rises from the furnace. At first, I tried not to step on the floor vent, but eventually I got so used to it that I barely noticed it anymore. The house phone was right above it in the hallway. I was downstairs in the basement, quietly working and trying to figure out my next steps, when I suddenly heard Karen's voice drifting through the vent. "Yes, I gave him the tickets. He's still unsure. I don't know. I keep telling him he won't enjoy going. No, I can't just tell him not to come. I know, I want that too, but I'm trying to keep the marriage together after everything. I just need some space so I can enjoy a few weeks to myself. I deserve that. I've earned it. Yes, I want to spend those weeks with you too. All right, let's wait a little longer. I'm sure he'll figure it out. Okay, sweetheart, I miss you too. Write something beautiful for me tonight." When she ended the call, my throat tightened. I wasn't stupid. Either Karen was already cheating or she was dangerously close to it. Either way, what I had just heard demanded answers. I spent 20 minutes forcing myself to calm down and think clearly. I knew I needed to become the kind of liar I had always despised, at least for now. I needed to hide what I knew until I figured out what to do next. So I called out upstairs, gently, "Karen, I'm heading to Jake's to tell him the good news." "Oh, that's wonderful, honey. Have fun," she replied cheerfully. I left through the basement door. Visiting Jake was just my excuse. What I needed was distance and someone I trusted. Jake had been my best friend since childhood. "You're kidding," Jake said when I told him everything. "No way. She'd never do that to you." "I want to believe that," I said, "but she's clearly trying to keep me away from that seminar, and she's calling someone sweetheart. That sure as hell isn't me." We sat in silence for a while. Sometimes that's all a man needs from a friend. Just someone to sit next to you while everything falls apart. "You need to talk to her," Jake eventually said.
You can't torture yourself for months without knowing the truth. And what do you expect her to say? If I check the phone records tonight, it won't be Frank. Whoever she called sweetheart wasn't him. Whoever she's planning with isn't him either. I'd bet everything on that. So what's your move? I'm gonna sit down with her and be honest. That's what 25 years of marriage deserves. I'll tell her I love her. I'll tell her it hurts that she doesn't want me to go, and then I'll ask her directly what she's hiding. You think she'll admit anything? No, but I'll say it anyway, even if she hates hearing it. She needs to understand that cheating would destroy everything. She'll probably insist I'm imagining things and push me to take that fishing trip. I paused. By the way, I've got 2 tickets to a fishing camp in northern Canada, end of June. One of them's yours. All right. Yeah, I'll go. I'm with you, man. We talked for hours, drank a little, tried to make sense of everything. Eventually, I headed home. After dinner, I asked Karen to sit with me in the living room. I told her what had been weighing on me. Not everything, but enough. Karen, I'm worried. You haven't been fully honest with me about this writing seminar. I overheard you and your group discussing it back in March, yet you didn't tell me anything. I even heard you joking about affairs among writers, and I didn't find it funny. You talked to Frank about your trip, but when I ask, you tell me something completely different. And when you finally told me you were accepted, you did everything you could to stop me from coming with you. It feels like you're trying to make sure I'm nowhere near Illinois while you're there. I don't think you've been honest with me, and I'm starting to wonder if you've been faithful. E.B., I would never cheat on you. What's wrong with you? You're my husband. All I want is for you to enjoy yourself. It hurts that you'd think something like that. She insisted she loved me, but something inside me remained uneasy. Karen, is this seminar your way of escaping our marriage? That was the end of our conversation. No comforting words, no clarity. Karen exploded, yelling through the rest of the evening, and when she wasn't yelling, she was silent. For the entire next week, she weaponized silence to pressure me into backing down. But it didn't work. If anything, it convinced me even more that something was wrong. Eventually, I let her think she'd won. If she planned to cheat, there was little I could do to stop it. And the phone call I overheard suggested she might have already crossed the line. I thanked her again for the trip to Canada, but inside I felt empty. The moment she got what she wanted, she flipped a switch and started acting like the perfect loving wife, a performance meant to keep me calm. But I know when I'm being manipulated. The seminar in Illinois was around 800 kilometers away. I knew no one there, so I asked a colleague who he had hired when he suspected his wife of cheating. I followed his advice. The private investigator he recommended worked in Illinois. The seminar took place on a state university campus, perfect for surveillance. He couldn't enter the program itself, but the participants ate in student dining halls, visited local bars, and stayed in a large dormitory. Plenty of places to observe without being noticed. A few students even assisted him using modern equipment. At the end of the semester, our daughters chose to stay at their universities for summer research, leaving Karen and me alone in the house. I kept trying to repair our relationship, at least on the surface. I kept inviting her out, cooking dinner at home, taking her to different events. She seemed to enjoy all of it, and for a while I let myself believe we were making progress. But every time I told her I loved her, I felt cold distance behind her polite smile. Piece by piece, the truth formed. The problem wasn't that she stopped loving me. It was that she stopped valuing me. I'd become something familiar and safe, something she could depend on without giving anything back. She felt secure enough to chase new excitement, take a break from our marriage, and assume I'd still be waiting the moment she returned. That realization helped me shape my plan. On the day of her departure, I knew I couldn't stay silent. We stood by the door as her airport shuttle pulled up. I hugged her tightly, told her I loved her, and said, "Please don't do anything that could destroy our marriage." She shot me a sharp, irritated look. "I'm tired of you not trusting me. When I get back, we're going to have a serious talk about this." She gave me a quick, dismissive peck on the cheek, grabbed her bags, and headed for the bus without a single glance back. In that moment, I knew our marriage was already over. 25 years together, 2 grown daughters, all of it fading like a plant left unwatered too long. The private investigator did his job flawlessly. According to him, the lovers didn't even try to hide. Being far from home gave them a sense of freedom. Karen had likely removed her wedding ring on the plane. It certainly wasn't on her finger when she arrived. She openly introduced herself as recently divorced. My wife and Frank were inseparable from the moment they met, holding hands, kissing, behaving like teenagers drunk on first love. The investigator cleverly installed a tiny camera in the hallway of their dorm. Karen and Frank each had their own rooms, but only used one. Sometimes hers, sometimes his, but never separately. I already had a good idea of what happened behind those doors, but my team went the extra mile to get undeniable proof. One evening before dark, they slipped a miniature fisheye lens camera under the door. The footage was shockingly clear, and it didn't take long to see that Frank didn't even bother with protection. That was the final straw. My decision became absolute. I was done with this marriage. Whatever else my team collected after that was merely additional confirmation. After the first week at the seminar, Karen's fate was sealed. While she enjoyed her writing retreat, I spent that time preparing my own plan. When she returned home, I would already be gone. There would be no emotional speeches, no tearful arguments, no ultimatums, no desperate attempts to fix something beyond repair. Only divorce. Love does die overnight, but what is love without trust? I could never build a future with a woman who betrayed me. Some might say my choice was weak, that she deserved humiliation, revenge, financial destruction. But the law wouldn't allow that, and I refused to ruin the rest of my life just to punish a cheating wife and her pathetic lover. My revenge was simple. I took from her the one thing she always relied on, my steady presence, the thing that supported her, comforted her, lifted her spirits, gave her stability. I removed myself. Frank was never husband material. He could never give her what she needed long term. And where would a divorced 50-year-old woman find lasting love and emotional security? That wasn't my concern anymore. She would no longer be my responsibility. Every few days, the private investigator sent more photos, videos, and recordings, proof of the betrayal committed by the person who once promised me loyalty. Reading the reports was painful. Watching the videos was worse. But the audio, that was the hardest, especially when they talked about me. "He keeps texting me about the fish he caught," Karen laughed. "He thanks me almost every day." "He has no idea," Frank chuckled. "Just keep him in the dark like a mushroom. He'll whine less. Let him enjoy himself." "When I get back, I'll deal with his accusations. How dare he keep accusing me of cheating? I just took a little break from our marriage. Right, sweetheart? Or is it some other woman sleeping with me every night?" Frank mocked. They both laughed. "He might suspect something, but I won't tolerate it. I'm a writer, damn it. He holds me back with his schemes and computer nonsense, with his measurements and—"
I realized that neither of them, neither Karen nor Frank, could ever satisfy me. As long as my life remained tied to hers, There was only one choice left. I began the process of distancing myself. I spoke frankly with my boss, explaining everything. He understood, having recently gone through something similar himself, and arranged for my transfer to our Portland office. I liked the idea immediately. I knew the people there, they were professionals, and I enjoyed their company. The city and the state appealed to me as well. I hired movers to transport half of my furniture and all my personal belongings north. I made sure my car was ready for the long drive. I also consulted a lawyer to start the divorce process. As for finances, Karen had her own insurance and retirement accounts. I removed her name from all my assets and designated our daughters as my heirs. I signed away my claims to the house, transferring it to her in exchange for no alimony. Her car remained hers, and she had to maintain its insurance herself. I planned to settle bank accounts and credit cards closer to the end, keeping my intentions secret. From that point, I focused on strengthening my resolve. I tried calling Karen to ask how the seminar was going and to express my love, but I soon realized her lies only reinforced my conviction that I was doing the right thing. Less than 2 minutes into one call, she admitted her feelings and hurried off to dinner. Later, the private investigator reported that Frank was near her, exchanging suggestive looks and mocking gestures. It became obvious she treated the whole situation as a joke. I was convinced I was moving in the right direction. Eventually, I decided to communicate with her only via text. I couldn't trust myself to control my emotions in a phone conversation. I sent her messages about successful fishing trips, but in reality, it was Jake and his wife taking those trips, enjoying themselves fully. Jake had made the right choice in his spouse, and we said goodbye before my departure. They promised to visit once Karen's 6-week seminar was ending. I completed my final tasks. A friend who worked as a realtor gave me a for sale sign to place in the front yard. I couldn't sell the house without her consent, and I had already transferred it to her, but she didn't know that. When she returned home, the first thing she would see would be that sign. I changed the locks to make it feel alien to her. I selected certain photographs from her seminar, including intimate shots from the camera placed under the dorm door. Frank and Karen's faces were clear, and I compiled a copy of the private investigator's report. I left everything on the dining table so she would know her actions had been discovered. Most of my belongings had already been moved and stored by the movers until I was ready to retrieve them. I took only 2 suitcases, my laptop bag, and my guitar. The guitar was essential. I couldn't trust it to the movers. Originally, I planned to leave the next morning, knowing she would return only late in the evening. That way, I would already be gone before she arrived. But the night before, I changed my mind. I wanted her to feel the pain before she even returned. I emailed her 3 carefully chosen photos of her and Frank, along with a message. I am divorcing you. I am divorcing you. I am divorcing you. One photo showed them almost hugging on a dance floor, clearly without her wedding ring. The second showed them entering his dorm room holding hands. The third was a screenshot from the hidden camera, her face clearly visible. I hoped the images would ruin her final romantic evening with Frank while she frantically searched for non-existent cameras. Then I turned off my phone. Leaving the house that had been our family home for decades was agonizing, terrifying, and at the same time liberating. In essence, my wife no longer existed in my life. I didn't know when or why it happened, but it felt as if she had died. Even if I wasn't the cause, the woman I once knew was now a stranger, someone I did not recognize and with whom I had no desire to reconnect. I began a new life. Amid deep loss, there was an odd sense of freedom. The weight of deceit, betrayal, and humiliation lifted from my shoulders, even if only temporarily. Despite the late hour, my mind was restless. I drove about 100 miles along a quiet highway, lost in thought, until I found a hotel for the night. I didn't seek a chain hotel. I wanted something local and authentic. The next morning, I enjoyed a plate of cornmeal porridge while reconsidering my trip to Portland. I could have rushed north, fleeing my problems, but I had 2 weeks before work began. There was no reason to hurry. I needed time to calm my mind, come to terms with my wife's betrayal, and leave the past behind. I decided to take my time, enjoying the scenery and connecting with each state and its people along the way. That week became a transition from my old life to my new life. I spent the remaining day wandering Williamsburg among summer tourists, exploring the work of skilled craftsmen and artisans. Even without a reservation, I found a place to sleep after a light dinner. My thoughts returned to my failed marriage. Around this time, Karen was probably on her way home. I wondered how she would react to the "for sale" sign in the front yard and the realization that her keys no longer worked in the locks.
Update 4. I was sitting in my hotel room in downtown Annapolis and finally turned on my phone. As expected, it was filled with numerous missed calls, emails, and messages. Most of them were from Karen, with a few from friends. I read and listened to everything. It wasn't easy, but it was a necessary step. At first, Karen tried to convince me that things weren't what they seemed. Of course, these were messages she had sent from Illinois before returning home and seeing the remaining photos and the private investigator's report. Meanwhile, my friends informed me that Karen was trying to contact everyone to find out where I was, but she had no idea she was looking in the wrong place. Jake and his wife knew, but I intentionally kept the rest in the dark. I planned to tell them everything once I settled my affairs. I already understood that I couldn't remain a ghost forever. 2 calls genuinely concerned me. They wanted to know my location. I deliberately hadn't told them about my decision to leave their mother because I wanted to do it personally. However, I couldn't let them worry, so I spoke to them calmly and explained the situation. They were upset and couldn't believe their mother could act that way. I sent them the same photos I had sent Karen the night she left, along with the private investigator's report, so they could see the truth. Afterward, they promised not to inform their mother about my actions. There was one more missed call, from my lawyer. He informed me that Karen had been officially served divorce papers. Now she understood I wasn't joking. He also told me that Frank's wife had received the full set of photos, videos, and audio recordings from the 6-week seminar in Maryland. Finally, I made it to New Jersey. Well, not exactly. I crossed the border, but didn't stop until I reached Connecticut. Once there, I spent several hours exploring historic coastal towns. I had no particular goal, but the architecture was so strikingly different from what I was used to in North Carolina that I felt I was in a new place, both physically and emotionally. The next morning, I knew it would be the hardest day of all. After a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, toast, and strong black coffee, I mentally prepared for a difficult conversation with my eldest daughter, Claire, at Brown. The drive took a little time, and I arrived at her dorm late in the morning. We decided to delay the talk for an hour or two so she could pretend things were normal. She showed me the campus and then took me to the dining hall, introducing me to her friends. These were precisely the young people I had hoped she would be surrounded by, friendly, attentive, supportive of one another. On the way out, I pulled Claire's roommate aside and told her that Claire would have a tough day. I asked her to look after my daughter, and she responded, "Of course, Mr. Baker. She told us everything last night. We're here for her." Yes, my daughter had chosen her friends wisely. Claire and I spent several hours in her dorm room, having a long talk. I showed her the photos and played the audio recordings I never imagined I would share with my own child. Her emotions oscillated between sadness and anger. "I can't believe Mom could do this. Is this even the same woman who raised me? What a disgusting person she's become." I had to intervene. "Claire, despite what she did, she's still your mother. Remember, she betrayed me, not you." "Sorry, Dad, but she destroyed my only family." It was impossible to argue. Throughout the day, we continued talking, and I explained my plans moving forward. I suggested gathering some friends, and we went out to dinner at the best place in town, or at least the best within my budget. I shared stories from my college years, and I think it made them see their current situation in a new light. That night, I stayed in a local hotel. The next morning, I had breakfast with Claire, hugged her as she cried, and then headed north to Boston to meet Denise. Claire had probably told Denise about our conversation, so her reaction was more composed than her older sister's. Frustration and anger were still present, but there was less shock. She asked to see the evidence, and I showed her. Coincidentally, her mother called while we were talking, and I signaled to Denise, motioning energetically as if I were slitting my own throat. She understood immediately. Denise had always been more rational in our family. Then she did something I never expected. "Mom, Dad called last night. Is it true? Did you become a woman who cheats on her husband and lies about it? Are you involved with multiple partners?" Wow, my daughter knew exactly how to choose her words. Denise said her mother was in tears, trying to justify herself, but Denise didn't believe a single excuse. Later, I drove Denise and her friends to a Thai restaurant near the campus. Like her sister, Denise had chosen friends wisely, and dinner went pleasantly. On the way back, one of her friends said, "Mr. Baker, Denise told us what you went through last night. It was really hard for her, but we supported her. Maybe you can come again sometime, and we'll invite you to our dining hall." It made us all laugh. In reality, perhaps we would find an even better place, which caused even more joking and laughter all the way back to the dorm. I found a place to stay overnight, had breakfast with my daughter the next morning, and on the 7th day of my journey, I continued north. I left Boston, and after a few hours was only 2 hours from Portland. Gradually, my focus shifted from my soon-to-be ex-wife to my daughters. They were becoming strong, principled young women, and I couldn't be prouder. I now understood that they would handle the upcoming divorce far better than I had imagined. The hardest part was leaving these two amazing girls, not knowing when I would see them again. As it turned out, my worries were unnecessary. I wasn't yet ready to face the reality of starting a new life, so when I reached Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I turned west toward the White Mountains and the Presidential Range. I rode the cog railway to the summit of Mount Washington. Standing there, looking at the smaller peaks of the White Mountains and the green pine forests below, feeling the cold Arctic winds, out of place in early August, I finally felt reborn inside. I was alone, but I stood there confidently. I had undergone a transformation, leaving behind the hardships and regrets of my past life, ready to embrace a new chapter with all its possibilities. I stood on that height, ready to embark on a new journey. Everything I desired lay ahead. The next morning, I ordered a plate of pancakes with real maple syrup, feeling rested and energized. I got back in the car and headed to Portland. I arrived around midday and decided to stop by my new boss's office to let him know I had arrived. I already knew about half the staff and was warmly welcomed. My new boss, Henry, gathered the office to introduce me to my colleagues. I quickly checked my workspace, but before long everyone was asking where we would go for dinner. I thought we'd head to a downtown restaurant, but to my surprise, we ended up at Henry's home, grilling steaks and enjoying all the accompanying dishes. I knew I should have tried lobster. After all, I was in Maine, but I wasn't in a hurry. It was more about rejoining society, enjoying good company, and savoring truly excellent steaks and outstanding local beer. Everyone asked me about my story, what made a guy from the South fundamentally change his life and move to Maine. So I told them. I left out geographical details, but shared enough for them to understand. I ended the story with a small request. Over the next few weeks, I might be a little irritable. It's not in my nature, but I have a lot on my mind. I hope if I start acting out, you'll call me out and tell me to calm down, Sometimes I need gentle but firm feedback. Unexpectedly, every woman present hugged me and kissed me on the cheek, and every man placed a hand on my shoulder. They said, "We're here for you, EB," and that's all I needed. Later that night, once I settled into my hotel room, I turned on my phone again. Both my daughters had sent supportive messages. They'd probably shared my number with their friends because I received about 10 more messages from young people expressing gratitude for dinner and letting me know they'd be there for my daughters. These kids were truly wonderful. Some of my friends continued to try to contact me as well, but it was clear I had a new support network and a new life was beginning. So I decided to talk to each of them and explain the situation. To prevent them from worrying, I didn't reveal my exact location. That would come later. I simply told them why I left. Despite their initial reluctance to believe me, I sent them the same 3 photos I had sent to Karen and informed them that I had even more compromising evidence if they needed further proof. I thought about it, but honestly, I couldn't find a single reason to protect Karen from the consequences of her own actions. I had tried, but it didn't work. So let the truth come out. Over time, I received messages of love and support from each of my friends, and I reassured them that I would stay in touch. It became increasingly clear that my plan to become a ghost was just an illusion. Too many people cared about me, and that, without a doubt, felt good. I went through the remaining messages from Karen and listened to missed calls. Eventually, she admitted everything. Her confession, however, was mixed with strange flashes of anger. Somehow, she managed to blame me for her actions and everything that happened, but that was simply absurd. I sent her a message saying I would call her the next day around noon. Sooner or later, it had to happen. Let's just say the conversation left much to be desired. She fluctuated between accusations, guilt, and denial. She expressed regret, heavily influenced by Frank. "It's my fault because I worked too much," she said. She even had the audacity to claim that nothing serious happened between them, that they were just fooling around. I almost laughed when she tried to convince me that she was simply seeking creative inspiration. She went so far as to accuse me of turning our daughters against her, as if her own actions couldn't have done that without my help. When she finally went silent, I spoke clearly. She contacted Frank to betray me, resisted my attempts to save our relationship, committed adultery, and now faced the consequences. I no longer cared why she did it. When I hung up, she was still crying and trying to justify herself. But for me, it was over. There was no turning back. I knew too much. I found a simple but cozy 2-bedroom apartment in an old building near the office. I thought walking to work would be good for me and initially saw it as a temporary solution, but my perspective changed quickly. Living in the city without the burdens of home ownership and having a small weekend cottage on the coast seemed like a good plan. Then I thought, why not stop at a cottage? I could buy a boat, keep it in the harbor, and make it my maritime sanctuary. By the time I sorted through these thoughts, early autumn had arrived. I thought I would lead a solitary life, but that turned out to be far from the truth. I now actually spend more time with my daughters than I did when I lived with Karen. They come on weekends, once a month, often bringing friends. During those 36 hours they're here, my apartment comes alive, and I usually cook dinner for them before they leave. I crave the quiet afterwards, though I start missing them the moment they're gone. To my surprise, several of my friends have already visited, and others plan to come when the weather improves. I live alone, but I don't feel lonely. I've made new friends at work, and through my hobby, I've joined a very active sailing community. I've met interesting women, but I make an effort to be respectful and restrained while the divorce isn't finalized. Though the divorce will soon be official, Karen still contacts me. She never truly regrets anything and prefers to downplay the significance of what happened. She says, "Everyone does it. It means nothing." But it does matter. Fidelity matters, and so does deception and manipulation. I thought about explaining this to her, but I no longer see the point. Honestly, my life isn't completely separated from hers. With 2 daughters and many shared friends, total detachment is unlikely. Nevertheless, being thousands of miles away, I no longer live with the daily pain of rejection and betrayal. She was the center of my life until she stopped being the center of hers. Now I am forging my own path and creating my own future. A few positive things have come from this situation. First, I genuinely enjoy living here in the north. I'm experiencing my first winter in Maine, which was a bit of a shock, but if others can handle it, so can I. I've started looking for a boat and found a berth near the city, so I'm eagerly awaiting spring to start rope work and varnishing. The local restaurants are excellent, the microbreweries are fantastic, and the people are genuine. I believe life will work out for me. Has my heart fully healed? Not yet, but time heals wounds. Oh, and by the way, Frank's wife seems as old-fashioned as I am. She kicked him out and filed for divorce. Interestingly, neither Karen nor Frank has written or posted anything about it so far. Thank you so much for listening to this story until the end. Let me know what you think. My opinion, overall, everything was done correctly, but I probably wouldn't have moved so far north. To me, it feels like the author is escaping from problems rather than fully confronting them. Will it help? That's a big question. In life, there have been times when I wanted to run away from all the crap, and I did. But in the end, it felt like I returned to the same place because wherever you go, you take yourself with you. What else is there? Once again, thank you for watching this huge story until the end. Check out our previous video here, subscribe to our channel, there will be many more similar stories. See you soon.
They want us to follow a dress code at school? Nope. I'll wear whatever I want. A little background for context. I've never been a fan of dress codes just for the sake of having them. So, when I got into a boarding school that didn't require uniforms, I was thrilled. Honestly, I don't even hate dress codes in principle. My problem is always with how people interpret them. For example, if the rules say socks should be black or blue, 99.9% of people will assume it means navy blue. I'm the kind of person who'll show up in sky blue socks just to prove a point. Not to make trouble, but simply to share a sly grin with the handful of people who think, well, it does just say blue. It's my way of reminding the bureaucrats who wrote the rules that they aren't as airtight as they think. As my husband likes to say, I've always been a bit of a pain in the neck. I enjoy showing that either or isn't the only option. I've always dressed boldly, loved unusual combinations of fabrics and colors, and if someone had encouraged me to learn sewing back then, I probably would have become a fashion designer. But boarding school is hardly a place full of vibrant creativity. Despite being spirited, I was never a troublemaker. My mom used to describe me as a polite, well-behaved kid who could bend rules into a pretzel without ever technically breaking them. She had to word her rules very carefully whenever she left me home alone, but she also had to be cautious not to give me new ideas in the process. If someone presented a rule as unbreakable, I just had to test it. And if they were pushy or smug about it, I'd find the cleverest way possible to prove them wrong. My mom always believed critical thinking was the real key to success in life. She taught me that if you can analyze a problem and figure out a solution, you don't need to have all the answers memorized. You just need to know how to find them. Remember, this was a decade before Google and smartphones, so I don't fault modern parents for having a different mindset. Still, I'd raise my own kids with the same philosophy if I had them. She raised me to believe success comes to people who don't just answer apple when someone asks what that round red thing on the table is. Instead, you pick it up, study its weight and texture, notice the sheen on its wax, memorize its smell,
Because you never know when someone will ask you to describe the underside of an apple when there isn't one around. And when you grow up thinking that way, turning school dress codes inside out becomes kind of fun. So here's the actual story. At my boarding school, we had 2 dress codes. The first was called the class dress code, and that basically meant we were expected to look like young professionals. Pretty standard stuff: skirts below fingertip length for girls, shirts and ties for boys, and all the usual details. The second set was for downtime, called city dress. That was when we hung out in the student lounge or went off campus. It was more relaxed, but still had enough restrictions to prevent the girls from wearing anything too revealing, or the boys from dressing like slobs in ripped clothes. Now, I had these suede knee-high fringe boots. Actually, I had 2 pairs, one black and one brown. They were the warmest, most comfortable boots I'd ever owned, even before Uggs became a thing. My mom and I had fought over those boots for years, so it was a huge personal victory when she let me bring them to school. One day, a teacher pulled me aside and told me that the faculty had been discussing my boots and decided they didn't fit the class dress code. But I read the rules, I argued. There's nothing in there about boots like these. I know, she admitted, but we've decided they don't fit the image we want. But the color matches, I know. The material's fine too. Suede is allowed. Yes. The rules don't mention height. Riding boots are permitted, right? That's true. So why then? I demanded. I honestly can't tell if I felt more angry or hurt. Probably both. This teacher was someone I respected, someone who had always been kind to me, and I immediately understood why they sent her to talk to me instead of someone else. Because I wasn't the type to throw a tantrum or cause a scene. I was the type to plan my revenge quietly. All right then, I said calmly, and walked away. That night, I studied the dress code rules word for word, line by line. I read through every single sentence of that dress code over and over again. I even said the rules out loud, picked up every item of clothing listed, and examined it like I was some alien who only had this manual and a piece of fabric to figure out why humans wear these things. I had to admit, it was a strict code, but they made 2 big mistakes. First, nowhere did it say where each piece of clothing had to be worn. Second, there was no mention that you even had to look presentable. The rules only specified colors and lengths: skirts below fingertip length, socks above the ankle, sleeves covering elbows, and so on. Shoes had to be in muted tones: black, brown, or other earthy shades, like my fringe boots. But nowhere did it say you couldn't show up in, say, elf shoes. Of course, elf shoes wouldn't exactly scream professional, but still, loophole. I went to bed that night mad as hell, my head buzzing with mischievous ideas. I debated with myself for a long time whether I should even go through with it, but eventually I decided if I still felt the same way in the morning, I'd start phase 1. The next day, I woke up just as annoyed, and on my way to breakfast, I mentally made a list of the biggest clowns in my class. In the cafeteria, I found a couple of them and told them, "You know, the handbook is very specific about how ties must be knotted: Windsor, single, or double. And if it's a bow tie, it has to be tied in the classic way. But nowhere does it say ties have to be worn on the neck. The rule just says they must be properly tied." I suggested that they read it carefully that evening and decide for themselves what to do with that little loophole. The following day, ties were everywhere: on wrists, wrapped around glasses, tied across foreheads, looped around ankles, knees, thighs, even wrapped around fists like someone was stopping a nosebleed. If you could tie a Windsor knot on some body part, one of the boys in our school had done it. I was ridiculously proud of myself. Phase 1 was a total success. The teachers were irritated, of course, though plenty of students found it hilarious, until math class. One boy came in without a visible tie. He was the one who always wore a bow tie. The teacher looked down at him sternly and said, I know you all decided to play games with ties today. I think we've been patient enough, but you do know the rules say you have to be wearing one." He grinned, looked her in the eye, and replied, "I am wearing one. You just can't see it." The room erupted in laughter. Maybe he did tie it around his ankle under his pants, or around his elbow under the blazer. Who knows? But to the rest of us, he instantly became the guy who wore his tie on his junk. By the end of the day, I was considered the legend who had found a loophole, and he was the legend who took it to, well, the most infamous possible place. The very next morning, the school email newsletter had an announcement. The rules had been updated. Ties must now be worn on the neck only. Fun times were officially over. But phase 2, oh, that was the real challenge. I'd been eyeing the most ridiculous pair of boots I'd ever seen at the mall. They were silver, with holographic rainbow circles all over, had a 5-centimeter platform, a 10-centimeter heel, and lace-up fronts that came just above the ankle. Utterly outrageous. I knew there was no way I could get away with them to class, but for city dress, I wanted them so badly. After 9 years of uniforms, I was finally starting to enjoy fashion. I'd been saving money for months and would sneak into that store whenever I could, just to look at them. For a while, I tried to convince myself they were too expensive, but once they banned my favorite suede fringe boots, my desire for those wild rainbow boots only grew stronger. Eventually, I scraped together enough money. It felt like fate. That weekend, I practically skipped to the mall, grinning from ear to ear, only to find they were sold out in my size. I nearly burst into tears, but then, right next to them, I saw the same design in black patent leather. Until that moment, I'd dismissed the black pair as boring, especially compared to the silver ones. But here's the thing. Our dress code had an entire paragraph about patent leather shoes. They were allowed, but only if worn with pants. Why? Because of that absurd old belief that shiny shoes could reflect a girl's underwear if she wore a skirt. So my rainbow boots, absolutely banned. But their black patent leather sisters with silver accents, perfectly legal. Silver detailing was allowed, since shoelace eyelets could be made of metal. And the 5-centimeter platform and 10-centimeter heel, also fine. There wasn't even a height restriction for heels in the dress code. I guess the school assumed no high school girl would willingly spend an entire day in stilettos.
And unlike the shiny rainbow boots, their black patent leather version looked less like party footwear and more like ankle boots a pixie would wear. Funny thing is, I never would have even glanced at those black boots if it weren't for my newly discovered obsession with the dress code. The outfit started with these bright orange polyester pants, covered in tiny gray-green amorphous specks, something that vaguely resembled a microscopic giraffe print. The green was barely visible. From a distance, it just looked like some random texture over the orange. The clash between the two colors was so aggressive that the pattern literally seemed to vibrate, making you dizzy and even a little nauseous if you stared too long. By sheer luck, I'd also managed to grab an orange terry sweater in exactly the same shade. The result? From the waist up, I looked like a rejected Sesame Street character, while from the waist down, I resembled a disco-era misfit. Did I mention the pants were slightly flared? So on Monday, I walked into class looking like someone who'd been thrown off the set of Saturday Night Fever. My new platform boots had these heavy wooden heels that clumped so loudly they echoed through the entire building. Suddenly I was towering a good 10 centimeters over everyone else, more noticeable in the hallways, and even rivaling some teachers in terms of sheer presence. I caught a few of them throwing sideways glances at my boots, and I started keeping mental notes on which staff members apparently had it out for my suede knee-highs. It was obvious who found my appearance ridiculous. But I didn't stop there. It turned into a personal mission to curate the most hideous outfits my imagination could come up with. I didn't care how I looked anymore. I just wanted to make sure every piece still technically complied with the dress code. Even the teachers admitted my boots met the written requirements, they just didn't like them. I'd put effort into following their rules, and suddenly it wasn't good enough, simply because my choices weren't to their taste. So fine, If they didn't like my boots, I'd wear ugly boots every single day, forcing them to stare at outfits that nobody in their right mind would find appealing. And what could they do? Tell me daily that my clothes were wrong while failing to explain how? By their own admission, nothing I wore actually broke the rules, and I wasn't about to start breaking them. That's not my style. Living in a dorm had its perks. Girls shared clothes freely, so as long as you were willing to lend your stuff too, you essentially had access to 30 wardrobes, just in our block alone. My own clothes had been carefully coordinated, but once you started mixing them with other people's, the results became gloriously absurd. Like when my roommate's loud neon blouse, which she only ever wore with a black skirt, ended up paired with another girl's skirt in a clashing wild print. I wore it specifically because the colors screamed at each other. Still, not against the rules. Those scandalous slut boots, I only ever paired them with pants. I raided every thrift store, vintage shop, and secondhand place in town. And since our city had no shortage of hippies, the selection was fantastic. I put together 3-piece suits with ties that made me look so boyish that at a parent-teacher meeting, one of the teachers actually asked my mom if I was... Apparently dressing badly meant you were automatically gay. I'd braid my bangs into a thin plait, clip a heavy earring to the end so it dangled, and then swing it back and forth over my desk, or book, but only during the lessons of the teachers I suspected of discriminating against my boots. Basically, I did everything I could to annoy them with my appearance. At that infamous parent-teacher conference, they asked my mom to talk to me about my clothes. She blinked and asked if I was breaking any rules. They explained the boot situation. My mom laughed and told them there was nothing they could do. If there's one thing her daughter hated, it was being punished for a rule she didn't know existed. Or worse, one that had never even been written down. If you want to make a new rule right now to stop her, go ahead, Mom said. By tomorrow, she won't be doing this anymore. I promise you won't see those boots again. But the way she'll see it, you've taken away something she liked for no good reason. That's punishment, whether you call it that or not. And when she feels punished unfairly, she punishes back. Simple as that. My advice, drop it, and spend the summer rewriting your handbook. Otherwise, you'll burn through paper trying to keep up with all the loopholes she's going to find. My daughter lives for finding loopholes. Honestly, I regret giving her so many puzzle books when she was little. Hearing this, the teachers admitted the only real reason they were ignoring my new boots was this. When the teachers saw how I reacted to the suede boots ban, some of them honestly seemed afraid to imagine what I might show up in next if they tried to outlaw the second pair as well. But being the well-behaved student that I actually was, I never wore those suede boots again. And after that, no one ever gave me grief about my outfits. Well, except for one time when my skirt ended up way too short. That one wasn't even intentional. The following year, I didn't return to that school, but for completely unrelated reasons, so I never found out if they rewrote any of their rules. To this day, though, I've kept those black boots. They're still tucked away somewhere, and every time I stumble across them at the bottom of a box, I can't help but smile. I even held onto a t-shirt from that era. It is without exaggeration the single ugliest piece of clothing I own, but I just can't throw it out. Every time I see it in my closet, I start laughing, remembering the whole saga. Somewhere I've even got photos of me in that ridiculous fuzzy orange getup. If I ever dig them out, I'll definitely share them. Back then, I was having the time of my life breaking their so-called dress code, and it felt amazing. So, here's the takeaway. Whatever problems you're facing, try flipping them inside out. Look at them from a different angle, twist them around, play with them. You never know where the cracks might be hiding. And of course, this is also just another wonderful story about how amazing my mom was. She always had my back. Though if I'm honest, I suspect she was also quietly angry that the teachers hated our boots. Because if the school rules had been clearly written, she could have been wearing them all along. Instead, those awesome boots just sat gathering dust in my locker. I miss you, Mom. Edit. No, I didn't end up becoming a lawyer. Life just went in a different direction. These days I work for myself, building a business in a field I'm genuinely passionate about. I enjoy almost every minute of it. I'm happy, and I'm grateful that I get to love what I do. One last note. This whole story took place in the mid-90s.
I overheard my girlfriend mercilessly mocking me in front of her best friend, and it was brutal. My girlfriend's name is Jenna. She's 28, and we've been together for just over 2 years. I'm 33, a veterinarian, and we first met at my clinic. She had just moved to the city and brought her dog in for an ear infection. We started talking, and what was supposed to be a 15-minute appointment turned into an hour-long conversation. I had never been so captivated by a woman before. I used to live a typical bachelor lifestyle, thinking I'd probably stay single forever. My life, full of fleeting, casual encounters, was becoming increasingly dull and empty. Jenna is charismatic, with a large circle of friends, and her best friend is a guy named Dylan, whom she's known for years. I trust Jenna, but I'd be lying if I said their friendship didn't bother me. I'm not angry with her over it, and she assured me they've been lifelong friends with no romantic involvement. I'm confident enough in myself to accept their friendship, and even tried to get along with Dylan. He visited our city 3 times. He's a good guy, but it seemed like he didn't particularly like me. Jenna says he's just protective of her, but I think it's more jealousy than actual protection. Jenna had just finished graduate school this spring and was struggling to find work. We've been living together for a year, and I understand she couldn't yet contribute to rent or other expenses. I'm financially stable, so that wasn't an issue, but I didn't want my support to become an excuse for her to avoid seeking employment. I believe everyone needs financial independence, so I made it clear she should start paying half of the expenses once she got a job. On Monday, she messaged me that she had landed a job she really wanted after a tough interview. I was so proud of her that I decided to leave work early without telling her. I bought her favorite alcohol, picked up her favorite Chinese food, and a few weeks ago, I had bought her a necklace she loved in a shop. It had a small shark pendant, and she's obsessed with anything shark-related. I hid it in the basement, planning to surprise her later when she had forgotten about it. When I got home, I went through the side entrance to the basement to grab the necklace. As I climbed the stairs and opened the door, I overheard Jenna on the phone. Normally I wouldn't eavesdrop, but she was laughing until she cried. It sounded so sweet that I decided to wait until she finished the call to surprise her. She was talking to Dylan, which wasn't unusual. They spoke at least once a week. But then I caught what she was laughing about. It took me a few moments to realize she was mocking our intimate life. She said something like, "No, he doesn't even come close to my ex. My ex was at least 8 centimeters bigger. Every time I eat a tiny carrot, I feel sorry for him. It must be traumatizing to be bitten by the same size. It would almost be cute if it weren't so terrible. He has a great body until he takes off his boxers." There was a lot of laughter. Look, I don't care what strangers online think about my size, but what she was laughing at wasn't even true, which made it even more painful. I don't know about her ex, maybe he was huge, but I'm average, plain and simple. Not exceptional, but not a joke either. I've never felt insecure about it. Hearing my girlfriend discuss me with her friend, given my existing doubts about their relationship, was beyond hurtful. She also mocked me for being handsome, but not particularly smart. I'm actually well educated, so that didn't bother me. I know I'm intelligent, good-looking, and smart, with average equipment. After hearing this, I just left. Did I throw the flowers out of my car window? Yes. Did I cry in the parking lot? Yes. I think she either heard the basement door close or saw me drive off, because she quickly started texting me, asking when I'd be back. This happened on Monday, and I haven't brought it up with her since. I'm still processing it. It's painfully awkward, but damn it, I love her. I know I need to talk to her about it, but I don't know how. Any advice on how to start that conversation? I'm deeply hurt and not sure I can forgive her. I also want to add that I'm definitely planning to break up with Jenna. Today, I met 3 friends for a beer and told them what happened. Their advice matched yours. Break up and do it fast. I called my mom and told her everything too. Yes, I told her everything, even though it was embarrassing. We've always been very close, and I wanted to explain everything to her. I had never seen her so angry before. She knew that I had bought a ring for Jenna. I'll post an update once everything is settled, probably tomorrow. Emotionally, I'll be pretty shaken. Once again, thank you to everyone for the comments and support messages. I never expected so many people to take my side. Update. I finally gathered the courage and ended things with Jenna Thursday evening. Honestly, those were some of the most intense few days of my life. From Jenna's perspective, things got pretty messy. Apologies for the long post, but a lot happened. Following advice from friends, my mom, my brother, and many of you, I decided to talk to her in a public place.
My reasoning was simple. Someone capable of such cruelty and dishonesty could easily twist the story, claiming I was abusive or any other nonsense. I wanted to believe she wouldn't do that, but after everything, better safe than sorry. I initially considered just packing her things and breaking up without explanation, but after 2 years together, I felt it was better to talk things through calmly and listen to her side, if she had one, even if it wouldn't change my decision to end things. I took her to a wine bar downtown that has small private booths with curtains. Since Monday, Jenna had been acting like an angel, which could mean 3 things. She felt guilty for her cruel behavior, she thought I might overhear her, or she simply noticed my distance and didn't understand why. She dressed up nicely, and I have to admit, she looked incredible despite everything. Jenna was also very affectionate and kept dropping suggestive comments about what she wanted to do with me later, usually my cute little baby carrot. Normally I'd laugh and enjoy it, but given the circumstances, it was hard to hear and stay composed. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say many times, so once we sat down and our wine arrived, I started talking. I don't remember every word because adrenaline was off the charts. I began by telling her how deeply I loved her, how she was the only woman with whom I felt such a profound connection, someone I fully opened up to and trusted. I told her she was the only one I had considered marrying, and the reason I went shopping for a ring. I didn't mention that I had already bought it, or that I had imagined us having children in the coming years. She kept interrupting with phrases like, "Oh, how sweet," or telling me how much she loved me. Then I looked her straight in the eyes and asked her bluntly, if she loved me so much, why did she mock me so terribly in front of Dylan? Her expression gave me a certain satisfaction. As expected, Jenna initially denied everything and pretended not to understand what I meant. She claimed Dylan knew how much she loved me, and she never made fun of me in their conversations. I simply looked at her and said something like, "Come on, Jenna." Even after I explained that I came home early Monday and overheard everything, she continued to deny it. Her calmness was irritating. I told her we both knew she was lying, and what she said was inexcusable. I couldn't understand why she would say such things, especially since she lied just to laugh at me. She kept pretending I was imagining it. She insisted she loved me so much, was never dissatisfied with our intimate life, and would never complain about my size. She claimed she loved me for my intelligence and caring nature. Had I not heard it myself, I might have believed her. She deserves an Oscar for that performance. Some commenters asked if I was sure she was talking about me when discussing her ex and his crackling. She did mention my name, comparing me to him. I am completely sure she was referring to me and lying straight to my face. I told her I would drive her home so she could gather essential items from the house. My brother and his wife were there too. I wanted witnesses to confirm I let her collect her things without being aggressive. I said I'd pack the rest and leave it outside for her to take at her convenience. Jenna was shocked that I was actually ending things. She begged me to reconsider, but my decision was final. It was hard to hold back tears as she expressed how much she wanted to be with me forever and that she had planned to be the mother of my children. She kept asking what she should do now and where she would sleep. I told her that was no longer my problem and that she had plenty of friends she could stay with until she found a place of her own.
She only needed to take her clothes, toiletries, and a few personal items. Almost all furniture and decor in the house, which she had redone, had been paid for by me. And then the tears began. Jenna started crying, saying she couldn't understand how I could treat her this way. She repeated over and over that she always thought I was a good guy. I told her I am a good guy. That's exactly why I didn't throw her things on the lawn, change the locks, or leave without explanation. And then somehow she managed to twist the knife even deeper. She admitted she didn't know why she had said all those things to Dylan. Maybe it was because with him, she could laugh at things that would otherwise make her cry. Apparently, this included my penis. Normally, I don't stoop to sarcastic remarks, but I told her she was welcome to move back to her hometown and live happily with her ex and his 23-centimeter endowment. Seeing her tears vanish instantly was shocking. Clearly, in her eyes, I was a jerk, terrible with women, a failure, destined to be alone with a tiny carrot down there. She said she never really loved me, that she saw me more as a friend and stayed to avoid hurting me. Makes sense, I guess. Then she said that if I ever proposed again, she would call me a loser and a jerk. And just in case I didn't understand, she repeated her little carrot comparison. Oh, and apparently I'm doomed to die alone. I told her that dying alone is better than dying in a marriage with a woman who doesn't love or respect me. No joke. Then she just screamed. A long, unbelievably loud scream. Not even words, just pure noise. It was terrifying. After that, she ran out, calling me a disgusting pig. I had already paid the bill and apologized to the waiter for the drama. When I stepped outside, she was just standing there, crying. Even though what she did and said was awful, it still hurt to see her like that. I didn't want to just leave her outside in the cold, so I offered to drive her home so she could gather her things, but she had to stay somewhere else afterward. She agreed. The car ride was silent, incredibly awkward. When we arrived home, my brother and his wife were there. His wife stayed inside while Jenna collected her belongings, and my brother waited with me outside. The process went relatively smoothly. I left her a note explaining that her things were on the porch and she could collect them anytime I was at work. I didn't hear from Jenna all day until it was time to come home from work. She sent a vicious message wishing me every misfortune imaginable. I didn't respond. When I got home, I found my house in complete chaos. I have no idea if she made a copy of the key or somehow knew how to pick locks, but she got inside and destroyed everything. Breakable items were smashed, furniture ripped apart, and the kitchen was ruined. The only good thing she did was lock my 2 dogs in a room, probably to keep them safe from broken glass or spilled food. I have 2 cars, one for daily use and an SUV for work, which I use for house calls or transporting large or exotic animals. Among all this chaos, I remembered that I had given her the keys to the SUV in case of emergencies. She destroyed that too. Inside, flour was scattered and tomato sauce was spilled everywhere. It's just stuff, I know, but the most shocking part was that she could act so childish and destructive after everything we'd shared. Just the weekend before, we'd gone to a show, hung out with friends, played Monopoly, made up our own drinking game, watched Netflix, and even had sex multiple times. And now, my home and car were ruined, and I was left in turmoil. In a fit of anger, I immediately ordered 22-kilogram bags of mini carrots delivered to Jenna at her friend's address. 40 kilograms of tiny carrots, within an hour. That evening, I got plenty of angry and insulting messages from her. Yes, it was petty, but I don't regret it. Aside from the wasted food, hopefully she donates or cooks with them. I blocked Jenna. She's truly cruel, and I know I deserve better. Since Monday, I've reflected a lot on myself as a partner and tried to understand what might have caused her to build up resentment or dissatisfaction toward me. To be completely honest, I work hard, I make time for everyone I love, and I try not to bring stress home. Some days at work are just brutal, and today was one of them. I'll admit it. Jen and I had argued about this before, and I genuinely tried to organize my schedule so I could come home at a reasonable hour and leave the stress of work behind. But anyone who's a vet or knows someone in the field understands that we're always on call for emergencies. Sometimes we have patients that need constant monitoring or overnight care. Taking a day off is possible, but it's complicated. I have an incredible team that can handle most situations, yet even on days off or during vacations, I still get calls or messages. I'm sure there were moments when Jenna felt second to my work, and honestly, I know there were. She told me that herself. I tried to adjust, but there's only so much one can do. As far as I remember, I was never intentionally mean or rude to Jenna. Sure, there were bad days when I was irritated or distant, and we had arguments and disagreements, but nothing toxic or abusive. I really believed we had a strong relationship and that we were both happy. I was happy. Still, it's hard not to question yourself and wonder if I really had disappointed her or neglected her to the point that she felt so unloved that she acted out the way she did. I don't know. What I do know is that regardless of any perceived shortcomings on my part, her words and actions were completely unacceptable. I did not deserve any of it. that's on her. A quick update, I filed a police report and took photos of the wrecked house, hoping it will help cover at least some of the damages under insurance. Honestly, I don't expect much from the police since I can't prove it was Jenna. And frankly, I don't want to see her again. I just hope the insurance covers the damages and I'll move forward with my life.
My ex-wife cheated on me, then tried to become a copy of my new girlfriend after her lover cheated on her. My ex-wife, she's 48 and I'm 47, left me for a man who was actually married to her best friend from high school. Yeah, great friend. We've been married for 20 years, and I thought we had 2 kids together. Recently, I found out the younger one isn't biologically mine. She's his. My ex knew it from the start and kept it secret all these years. My name is still on the birth certificate, though, and I plan to fight for custody because that little girl is my daughter, not by blood, but by everything else that matters. Apparently, their affair had been going on for a long time. Finding out felt like being punched in the gut. When I asked her to choose him or me, she said him. Why? Because, in her words, he can go for a second round right after sex. That was it. That was her reason. She didn't care that I worked 2 jobs to pay for her college, that I gave up my dream of becoming a musician so she could stay home with the kids. Kids she was cheating on me around. She and the kids were my entire world, but she was never an easy woman to live with. She's bipolar, and life with her was a constant storm of anger and emotional abuse. I used to tell myself she couldn't control it, but later I learned from her own friends that sometimes she hit me simply because she felt like it. My kids saw it all, her screaming, her hitting me, and I just stood there, never fighting back. I hated that they had to witness that. Once, near the end, she snapped because I didn't take the trash out the moment I came home. She grabbed me by the throat and started choking me, right in front of our son. I managed to say, "He's never going to forget this." That's when she finally let go. Looking back, I should have left years earlier, but I stayed. For the kids. I thought I was protecting them. When the truth finally came out, she sat across from her best friend, the wife of the man she'd been sleeping with, and said, "Yes, it's true. No, I'm not sorry." Then she just got up and walked away. She moved out, took the kids, and moved in with him, in an apartment just down the street. Even then, I hoped she'd realize that the grass isn't greener. After all, this guy had cheated on his wife before, several times, and she knew that. I waited that entire first year thinking she'd come back. She even kept a spare key to our place, and I thought maybe she held on to it because she knew she'd return one day. But by the end of that year, things got ugly. Her new boyfriend would show up at the bus stop when I dropped off the kids for school, saying, "I came to say goodbye to my daughter, not yours, mine." I told him, "Then why were you fine letting her raise her for the past 5 years? Why did you let her take my last name? Why was I there for her birth while you were nowhere around?" He nearly hit me. That same night, they both came to my place drunk because he wanted to fight it out. My ex made it public, bragging all over Facebook about her new man. Our mutual friend saw it and immediately reached out to me and his wife. Of course, I took screenshots. She didn't seem to care that she was ruining her image before the divorce was even finalized. But honestly, why would she? By then, I had already confronted her with the paternity test results. For a while, I was destroying myself mentally, wondering what I could have done differently. She accused me of not being there. But how could I be when I was working 2 jobs to just keep us afloat? I'd come home exhausted, the house a mess, walls covered in crayon drawings, blinds ripped down, and she'd still scream at me for not taking the trash out. 16 hours of work a day, and that was her biggest problem. Eventually, I started to believe maybe it really was my fault, that I somehow caused it all. It took time, and my brother, to pull me out of that mindset. He forced me to join his band, said it helped me get my life back. I resisted, but he insisted, and it changed everything. I met some amazing people, started playing again, and eventually began dating a woman. 45, kind, warm, the complete opposite of my ex. For the first time in decades, I was in a relationship where no one yelled at me or threw things at my head. But my ex still had keys to our old place. She'd occasionally stop by to drop off things for the kids. One day, she walked in and found my new girlfriend there. It didn't go well. That evening, she called, furious, demanding to know who the woman was and why she was in our house. I told her calmly, my personal life stopped being your business the day you left. That didn't sit well with her. Over the past few months, she's gone completely off the rails because of my new relationship. She tried to friend request my girlfriend on Facebook, demanding she accepted so she could see who was around her kids. When my girlfriend refused, she called screaming that I needed to make her accept. My girlfriend took the phone and said, I don't owe you access to my private life. If it's about the kids, we'll handle it through messages or calls. After that, things got weird. Suddenly, my girlfriend started getting random friend requests from people who were all friends with my ex. Then, my ex began showing up at my house on weekends while I was at work, basically spying. One time, I was on the phone with my girlfriend when she whispered, your ex just walked in. When she asked what my ex wanted, the woman said she was just checking how much milk was in the fridge for the kids. My girlfriend told her we had everything under control, and she left. When I got home, I demanded she return the keys since she no longer lived there. She gave me a fake apology, then stole our son's keys to make another copy. Once our lease ended, my girlfriend suggested we move in together, mostly to get away from my ex's insanity. My ex tried to sabotage even that. She called the cops, claiming I was taking her stuff. When the officers asked her to name a single thing that belonged to her, she couldn't. Now, the kids stay with us every other weekend. They've told me their mom doesn't let them talk about what we do together. She doesn't want to hear it. But lately, she's been prying again, asking questions about our time. Honestly, it's just jealousy. We live by the coast, and when the kids are with us, we take walks by the ocean, play games, go to the aquarium. If they come home with prizes, she throws them away. And lately, I've noticed something strange. Whenever she drops the kids off, she looks almost exactly like my girlfriend. Same haircut, same color, same style. It's honestly disturbing.
Everything we do with the kids, she tries to copy the following week. If we go to the beach, she takes them there too. If we visit the zoo, she's suddenly going to the zoo as well. She finds out what we had for dinner, cooks the same thing, and even makes the kids tell her whose food they liked better. Last week, my son told me he wanted to live with us. He said, Mom's lost her mind. You can bet I'll be using that in court. And just when I thought things couldn't get any crazier, she started sending me explicit photos out of nowhere. My girlfriend was sitting next to me when the pictures came through. I immediately told her I hadn't asked for them, that my ex and I never talked like that, and even offered to let her check my phone. She laughed, looked at the photos, and jokingly asked for my ex's number, saying she'd send some of her own just to show her how it's actually done. I called my ex right away and asked what the hell she was thinking. I told her my girlfriend saw everything and was furious. She claimed she'd sent them to the wrong person. Then my girlfriend chimed in, your name is the first alphabetically in his contacts, and your boyfriend's is at the very end. So who exactly were you trying to send them to? The ex hung up immediately. Honestly, I have no idea what kind of game she's playing anymore. It's pure insanity. And just to clarify, my girlfriend didn't send her anything back. It was just a joke. She said she'd show her how it's done because those photos were laughably bad. Mirror selfies, no shirt, duck lips. My girlfriend just rolled her eyes at the lack of imagination. I don't live in the old apartment anymore. After I took back the keys, she used our son's to make herself a copy and kept breaking in. So I moved in with my girlfriend. The ex doesn't have access now. The kids don't have keys either for that exact reason. I'm currently fighting for custody. It's not easy since I'm not my daughter's biological father, but my name's on the birth certificate, which gives me legal rights. The ex has been prescribed medication, but I doubt she takes it. Whenever the kids come over, I check for bruises just to make sure no one's hurting them. Apparently, she even hit her boyfriend once, and he punched a hole in the wall, warning her that if she tried that again, he'd fight back. Comment: from what you've described, your ex sounds completely unstable, maybe even dangerous. You should talk to a lawyer and see about getting a restraining order. Update 1. Last weekend was my daughter's 6th birthday. It wasn't my scheduled time with the kids, but to my surprise, my ex asked if I wanted to have them for her birthday. Of course I said yes, and she even let me keep them for 2 extra days. I figured she and her boyfriend probably had plans and just wanted some kid-free time. But here's the weird part. This was the first time her boyfriend could have celebrated his own biological daughter's birthday, and instead, he just handed her off to me and my girlfriend. Tell me that's not messed up. Comment: he's a disgusting coward, the kind of man who got another man's wife pregnant. Don't expect him to act like a responsible adult. Keep a record of his neglect. It might help in court. Poor little girl stuck between terrible adults. Update 2. Looks like karma finally caught up to my ex. On Saturday night, I got a furious text from her saying I hope I was happy because I won. I know I shouldn't have replied, but I asked what she was even talking about. She sent a bunch of nonsense and then told me to go ahead and gloat, said I'd probably enjoy it even more since it's my fault something bad happened to her. I asked what exactly she meant, but instead of explaining, she went on a drunken rant about how all men are pigs and can't be trusted. That's when it hit me. She was drunk again, and her boyfriend had cheated on her. I didn't say a word. You can't reason with her when she's like that. I just read the messages, realizing she finally got what she deserved. She left me for my married friend, the same guy who'd already cheated on his wife multiple times. She was affair number 3. When I reminded her that the day she left, she said, "I know what I'm getting into." Well, turns out she didn't. She thought she'd be the one who'd change him. Guess not. When she ran out of insults for me, she turned her attention to my girlfriend, said I was ugly as hell and that I could have any woman, but chose a monster to replace her. My girlfriend is gorgeous, inside and out, and her ex clearly can't stand it. She's been obsessed, copying her looks, stalking her online, trying to provoke jealousy. Then she said something even more ridiculous. Claimed I didn't actually love my girlfriend because it's impossible to fall in love with the first woman you sleep with after losing me. We'd been separated for a year before I even met my girlfriend, and it took me a long time to trust again. That trust, she earned it. Then my ex accused me of being with my girlfriend only because I lost my old apartment and was mooching off of her for a place to stay. She said, "You're just pretending to love her because you're homeless." For the record, I had my own place, across the street from my ex. She intentionally rented nearby so I'd have to see her new boyfriend every day. When my lease ended, I moved in with my girlfriend and found work near her place. It was obvious she was trying to start a fight, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. And just when I thought her insults couldn't get dumber, she said, "I'm sorry I wasn't enough for you." God, I wanted to scream. You left me. Did she forget who walked out and replaced who? She dumped me for a married man who cheats constantly. What a prize. Then she went back to insulting my girlfriend, saying we both knew deep down I still wanted her and that my girlfriend couldn't compare. That's when I'd had enough. I told her to contact me when she sobered up and turned off my phone. A few hours later, my girlfriend came home and asked what happened. I handed her my phone and said, "Read it for yourself." She read the whole thing, laughed, gave it back, and said, "Looks like he cheated on her." I nodded, and she was right. She told me my ex's narcissism explodes when she's drunk, and that she's just angry she can't come over and sleep with me out of revenge. Haven't heard from my ex since.
I guess, like always, the next day she reread all her messages, realized what she'd done, and felt like an idiot. Still, I'm sure she's back with him again. She just can't stand being alone. I'm so glad your new girlfriend just laughed it off. She sounds amazing. Definitely a huge upgrade from your ex. Yeah, my girlfriend's incredibly calm and grounded. It's strange, but refreshing. I got so used to my ex's constant explosions that this peaceful vibe still throws me off sometimes. You reap what you sow, man. Karma really knows when to show up. Just keep living your life. Looks like revenge really is a dish best served cold. Your ex sounds either completely toxic or straight up unhinged. Do you think that was a manic episode? I just hope the kids are safe. Can you get full custody? Yeah, I'm already fighting for custody. And I saved all those messages. Another reason why I didn't snap at her. My ex got cheated on by the very same guy she left me for. No surprise there. 3 days later, they were back together again. She literally has nowhere else to go. Now, she's stuck with him. Since then, apart from signing some divorce papers and the occasional text about the kids, I haven't heard a thing from her. And honestly, thank God for that. Still, I'm sure she's back with him again. She just can't stand being alone. This Halloween, my brother's band got invited to play at a friend's annual event. They've been performing there for years. It's sort of a tradition now. My ex used to come with me before everything blew up, but last year she skipped it. That was around the time I found out she'd been sleeping with her best friend's husband and that my 6-year-old daughter was actually his child. This year, no one invited her, but she showed up anyway with the same guy she cheated on me with. I was furious. The event is strictly 18 plus, and she knew that perfectly well. I'm convinced she brought the kids just to get me kicked out. Security told her she couldn't bring children inside, but she stood there making a scene. Eventually, security came to me and asked if I could escort them out, and she immediately started yelling that I care more about some stupid party than my own kids. My friend, the event organizer, came over and said she could stay for 2 songs. Then she'd have to leave or he'd call the cops. I told him not to give in to her drama, but he said he was only doing it for the kids' sake. The night turned into a disaster. I was on stage most of the time, so I couldn't see what was happening in the crowd, but I heard bits and pieces between sets. Turns out my ex tried to start something with my girlfriend, and it did not end well for her. My girlfriend shut her down instantly and told her to stop using the kids as weapons. A lot of people saw it happen. When I finally got off stage, multiple people came up to me to explain what had gone down. My ex was glaring at my girlfriend from across the room, full of rage. And then, my daughter finished it off. She yelled across the whole hall, "I have 2 dads, my dad and mommy's boyfriend, who's my real dad." The room went silent. My ex turned beet red, hissed, "Thanks for embarrassing me," and stormed out. But my son refused to leave with her. He clung to me, crying, begging to stay. Her boyfriend eventually walked up to my girlfriend and asked if the boy could stay with us. She agreed, and even arranged with my friend to let him hang around until the end of the event. Later, we took him home with us. That entire night was pure hell. I must have apologized 1,000 times to my friend, my girlfriend, even my son, for dragging them into that chaos. I kept messing up songs during the set because my eyes were constantly scanning the crowd, terrified that another fight would break out. I didn't even know she had left the venue without her son until after our performance was over. When I took him home the next evening, she made sure to avoid seeing me. Her boyfriend came out instead, said she knew I'd be there and didn't want to talk about what happened. Then he apologized for everything and started venting about how she behaves. I cut him off, told him I'm not interested in discussing her anymore. Later that night, my son called me saying they were fighting again, screaming so loud the walls were shaking. Apparently, her boyfriend had finally snapped. He told her she still wasn't over me and accused her of being obsessed with my life. According to my son, he yelled something like, "What pisses you off more? That he's moved on and you can't crawl back to him? Or that if you hadn't cheated with me, he probably would have left you for his current girlfriend anyway?" That's what started it all. I could hear them yelling in the background. I asked my son if I needed to come get him, but he said no. I stayed on the phone until things finally quieted down. So yeah, that's where things stand right now. The divorce is still not finalized, but I've moved on. I'm done mourning what I lost. I just want to get my kids out of that mess. And yes, I'm still fighting for custody. She's furious because she can't come back. If you ever hear them screaming like that again while you're on the phone with your son, call 911. Get those kids out immediately. Child Protective Services will at least remove them for the night, and one of those two will probably face domestic violence charges. She's getting exactly what she deserves. Cheaters are never truly happy. They live in the fog of their own lies, and when it becomes real life, all the ugliness surfaces. Your ex knows he cheated before and will likely do it again, but she's stuck with him now. She's drowning in the consequences of her own choices. Stay strong and keep making your girlfriend happy. She sounds amazing. He was married when she slept with my wife and at least 2 other women that I know of, and she knew about it. When I confronted her on the day she left, she said, "I know what I'm getting into." She really thought he'd change for her. Yeah, sure. And that's pretty much it. What do you all think? Do you believe cheaters are just lost causes, or can people actually change if the circumstances are right? Personally, I think there are 2 types. Those who cheat because they need the thrill, and those who cheat because they're miserable and stuck in the wrong situation. The first type will always cheat. The second might stop once they finally find someone who fulfills them. Which one's more common? Hard to say, but I'm pretty sure it's the first.
Told my dad's friend exactly what I think of him. I told my father's longtime friend, a man who's treated me like a child my entire life, that I hate him. Years ago, my dad met a man named Harold through mutual friends, and they hit it off immediately. I was 18 at the time, a college student, and we were never close. Still, for some reason, Harold considered himself a family friend and always talked down to me like I was 5. Every time I saw him, I tried to convince myself he wasn't that bad, and every time, he proved me wrong within a minute. He didn't respect boundaries and loved to remind me I was just a kid. Whenever I joined a conversation, he'd mock me, my studies, my hobbies, anything, just to get a reaction. And when he saw he'd annoyed me, he'd grin and say, half jokingly, "Do you hate me yet?" I'd always reply, "No, but only because of Dad." The final straw came when I was 20. We were having a barbecue, and out of nowhere, Harold interrupted everyone to say, "You know, I actually like you, even though you're such a rude, arrogant girl." I'd been quiet the whole day, doing some homework while helping out, polite and calm every time someone spoke to me. Even if I hadn't been, that comment was completely out of line. After that, I started avoiding every family gathering where he might show up. Fast forward to yesterday, my dad's girlfriend was having a small birthday dinner at Dad's apartment. I came with my fiancé and our 6-month-old son, and of course, Harold was there. I hadn't seen him in years, but he talked to me exactly the same way, like I was some clueless teenager. Except now I'm 26, engaged, and a mother. Throughout the party, he kept offering advice that I was too young to marry, too young to raise a baby. Thankfully, most of the guests disagreed with him. My son slept through most of the afternoon, and when he woke up hungry, I went to feed him in my old bedroom. There's still a crib there. When I came back, I heard Harold joking about how long I'd been gone, making disgusting comments about me barely keeping up as a mom. Then he interrupted a conversation I was having with one of Dad's friends to start interrogating me about motherhood, like it was his business, and made more comments about my age. The moment he asked if I'd ever considered putting my baby up for adoption, I realized I was done. I grabbed my son, told my fiancé we were leaving, and said goodbye to everyone, except Harold. As we were heading for the door, he followed us, asking, "Why are you leaving?" I tried to brush him off, but he kept pressing. Finally, like he always did, he laughed and said, "Come on, do you hate me or something?" And this time, I looked him in the eye and said, "Yes, I do. Can we go now?" He just stood there speechless as we walked out. On the drive home, my fiancé told me he was proud of me. The next morning, my dad called and said the exact opposite, that I'd been rude, that I'd made things awkward. We argued a bit before deciding to drop it. I know this isn't over, but if it continues, it won't be because of me. It wasn't my proudest moment, and part of me regrets saying it out loud, but I'm done letting that man humiliate me. Edit. Wow, there are a lot of comments here, so I'll answer a few common ones. No, I don't think Harold is secretly in love with me. His behavior has always been patronizing and dismissive, not flirty. And for the record, no, he didn't tell me to give up my son. He asked me if I'd thought about it when I first got pregnant. Still an awful question, especially since he cut off another woman who was also pregnant just to say it. I don't like drama. When someone makes me uncomfortable, I leave. When I don't like a person, I avoid them. It's easier that way. My dad and I argued until I told him exactly what Harold said about adoption. That finally shut him up, though I don't think he fully understood that this wasn't the only reason I left. It was just the last straw. I don't expect my dad to stop being friends with Harold. He's an adult and can make his own choices. I never told him I hated Harold before because I didn't think I needed to. He's Dad's friend, not mine. I've been distancing myself from that man since I was 20. I've seen him maybe twice in 6 years. My fiancé didn't hear the comments. He was across the room, but I told him everything in the car, and he's completely on my side. Before we move to the update, I'll throw the question to you all. Do you think I was right to finally tell Harold I hated him? Personally, I think I was. He'd pushed me for years, waiting for that reaction, and I finally gave it to him. There's a big difference between teasing a teenager and insulting a grown woman who's a mother. Some people need to learn that line.
Update 1. Hey everyone. I honestly didn't plan to write an update, but I had a bit of time, so here we are. Let's start with the biggest theory, that Harold has a crush on me. I really don't think that's true. His comments have always been annoying and condescending, but never sexual. Though I'll admit, some of your replies made me a bit uneasy. Even if I regretted my words at first, I never once doubted that standing up to him was the right thing to do. I think the regret came from realizing that 8 years of keeping the peace had finally ended. It took a bit of time to feel the relief, but it came. Honestly, I wanted to tell him off ever since that barbecue years ago. That's when he went from annoying to insufferable. The day after I posted, my dad called Harold. Apparently, Harold tried to spin everything, said the adoption comment came from a place of concern, that he just worried I became a mom too young and didn't know what I was doing. He even apologized to my dad. Yeah, right. I don't buy it for a second. The next day, Dad called me and said I should forgive Harold because it was all a misunderstanding. He even suggested I apologize for overreacting and saying I hated him over something so small. Thing is, Harold made plenty of demeaning comments right in front of my dad, usually when others were around, so Dad just never noticed. He tends to ignore anything that doesn't directly affect or anger him. So no, I don't expect him to suddenly understand. For him, nothing Harold said was that bad. For me, it was years of disrespect. I told my father I hadn't exaggerated when I said I hated Harold, and that his comment about adoption wasn't the only reason. I listed nearly every humiliating thing he'd ever said or done, including what happened at the party. He didn't remember any of it. I made it very clear that I despised Harold long before that day and had nothing to apologize for. Then I told him that I wouldn't attend any event where Harold would be present. My father didn't have to stop being friends with him or inviting him over, but he needed to understand that he couldn't count on me being there. I said I'd always ask in advance who was invited, and if he lied, I'd simply leave. Dad said I was overreacting, but I reminded him that I had been avoiding Harold for 6 years, and no one even noticed, so clearly it wasn't a problem for anyone. Since that barbecue incident, I'd only seen him twice, once at lunch last week, and another time when I was pregnant. Clearly, my father's life hadn't fallen apart without me socializing with his friend. I told him I wasn't obligated to like his friends, just like he wasn't required to like mine. We argued a bit, but in the end, he agreed to my terms. Yesterday, while we were talking about something unrelated, he casually mentioned that Harold was upset. I ignored it. I'm not planning to cut contact with my father completely. I know there were moments over the past few years when I was close to doing it, but ultimately I realized it wouldn't change much. Our relationship actually became easier once I moved out. Now we only see each other a couple of times a month. It still annoys him that I rarely call or text, but at least he stopped complaining. There's no point in cutting off someone who no longer has control over your life. It's better to remember what they did wrong while raising you and make sure not to repeat their mistakes with your own child. Though honestly, my father's been walking on thin ice for a long time. I don't let him stay alone with my son. I don't trust him for more than an hour. When I got pregnant, I began encouraging him to start therapy. And finally, this June, he did. His attitude toward me and my younger sister, who splits her time between our divorced parents, has genuinely improved since then. I made it clear that if he quits therapy, I won't let him see his grandson. For the first time ever, my dad actually seems to be changing for the better. It's hard to stay optimistic, but I'm trying. And if I ever decide to go no contact, it definitely won't be because of damn Harold. That's about it, really. I'm relieved that I don't have to pretend anymore. Things with my father are still tense, but I'm not dwelling on it. My main priorities are my son, my fiancé, and my work, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
Update 2. Last week, my fiancé, our baby, and I spent a few days visiting my cousin. On the day we arrived, we went with her to pick up her daughter, my little cousin, I'll just call her my niece, from school. When we got there, she was chatting with a boy. She saw us, gave him a friendly goodbye hug, oh the horror, and ran over to us. We talked for a bit, and then she immediately focused on my son, completely smitten. She grabbed my fiancé's hand and dragged him off to show our baby to our classmates while I waited with my cousin. A few minutes later, someone called out my cousin's name. It was the boy's mother. She walked over, pointed at my cousin, and snapped, "You need to teach your daughter some manners. She shouldn't be talking to my son, let alone hugging him. They're far too young for that." Then she turned around and left without waiting for a reply. For reference, both kids are 5. All he did was compliment her Shrek Crocs. Update 3. I checked someone's essay for grammar, and now that person blames me for getting a failing grade. Since high school, I've occasionally proofread friends' papers, mostly fixing grammar and making small tweaks. One friend didn't even understand what paragraphs were until college. I'm no professional, but I've always been decent enough that people kept recommending me. I graduated in 2019, I don't teach, don't study anymore, and don't charge money, I just do it for fun, though lately not so often. I have a job, a husband, and a baby, and most of my friends finished school years ago. One of the few exceptions was a close friend who recently decided to get a second degree. Last week's class had to submit a big written project, and he recommended me to a classmate. Let's call him Derek. He's 18 and sounded normal on the phone, though in hindsight I think he was probably high. He promised to send his paper at least 24 hours before the deadline so I could check it for grammar. Instead, he sent it at 1 a.m. the day it was due at 7:30 a.m. I was annoyed, but decided to keep my word. It was 3 pages long, and I immediately realized that at least half of it had been written by ChatGPT, badly. The facts were wrong, it even mixed up 2 completely different people, which ruined the entire section. But since it was 1 a.m., and the grammar in that part was fine, I focused only on fixing the truly awful mistakes in the rest. I sent it back within an hour. He didn't even thank me. Yesterday, Derek got his grade, 2 out of 10. His professor apparently said that was generous. Derek's reaction, he texted me, "What the hell did you do? You were supposed to fix everything." I reminded him that I only correct grammar, not factual errors. Both I and our mutual friend had told him that multiple times. He kept arguing that I should have rewritten the wrong parts, since I noticed them. So basically, this guy submitted a half AI written paper and now blames me for his failure. Judging by his messages, he actually expected me to rewrite chunks of the essay for him. The audacity. I get it. Being a student is hard. I've been there. But I would never treat someone who's helping me for free like that. Honestly, I'm seriously considering never proofreading anyone's work again. Update 4. A quick one, but it's about Harold. Hi, everyone. Can't believe it's been over a year since my last update. I meant to write sooner, but life has been hectic. Raising a toddler, getting married, working like crazy, and binge-watching Supernatural. So yeah, I've been busy. Avoiding Harold openly has worked beautifully. My father respects my boundaries. Every time he invites my husband and I for dinner, I ask who else will be there, and if Harold's on the list, he tells me honestly. He's never lied, and he doesn't insist if I say I'm not coming. Since then, I've only seen Harold once, at my father's birthday party a couple of months ago. Yes, I knew he'd be there.
My dad promised to tell him not to talk to me. Plus, there were going to be kids there, children of my dad's friends, some of whom I used to babysit. I love those kids more than I hate Harold, so I went. I spent most of the evening with my son and the kids. Harold didn't speak to me once, so I guess my father kept his word, though I did notice Harold glance at us a few times, and my husband caught him too, and my husband, the calmest man alive, somehow managed to look intimidating in return. God, I love that man. But guess who did talk to me? Harold's new girlfriend. Yep, he's dating someone now. We crossed paths twice. First when she came over to coo over my son and told me he needed a haircut. Instant dislike. Later she came back and said, "You're shy, aren't you?" I said, "No." She laughed and added, "Oh yes, you are." She said it in that sing-song tone people use with 6-year-olds. I barely kept a straight face, otherwise I might have told her that I just preferred hanging out with kids who were far better company than her and her insufferable boyfriend. Honestly, they're perfect for each other. Not much else to add. My dad broke up with the woman he was dating last year, long story, and now he has a new girlfriend. She's not annoying or crazy, and honestly, I like her. Still, I'd bet their relationship won't last more than a year. Things with my dad aren't perfect, but they're better. He actually apologizes now. Maybe it's therapy working. Or maybe motherhood just made me terrifying. Either way, I'm not complaining. And I have to admit, he's turned out to be a great grandpa. I'm genuinely happy my father continues to respect my boundaries regarding Harold. I don't need that man in my life at all. Right now, I'm content. My son's happy and healthy. Part of me misses when he was tiny, but I'm prouder of him every single day. Watching your child grow into himself, it's just the best feeling in the world.
I caught my girlfriend cheating with my closest friend, turned him over to the police, and cut all ties with her. My late wife, Rachel, and I grew up in a medium-sized town with around 30,000 people. We'd known each other since we were about 6 years old and were practically inseparable. By 16, we started dating, and when we turned 18, we moved a few hours away to pursue jobs. At 20, we got married and bought our first house. 2 years later, she became pregnant with our son. That's when tragedy struck. About 5 weeks before her maternity leave, a massive shelving unit at her workplace collapsed on her. I was told that she and our unborn baby were killed instantly. 2 of her co-workers were also caught in the accident. One was left paralyzed, and the other lost a leg. The cruel reality was that her employer had chosen to keep using old, unsafe storage racks to save money instead of replacing them. To this day, I can't forgive the executives and managers responsible. They stole the love of my life and ended my child's future before it even began. Not long after, the company offered what they called a settlement. To me, it was nothing but blood money. They wanted to avoid a lawsuit, but I wanted justice. Thankfully, the case gained media attention, politicians got involved, and the trial was fast-tracked. Within 3 years, the payout was nearly 10 times what they initially tried to offer. Several executives were fired, fined, and some even ended up in prison. During this time, I continued working at my telecommunications job. My mother, God bless her, moved in with me to help, and honestly, I don't think I would have survived that period without her support. Around the same time, I was offered a promotion that required frequent travel across the state. Instead, I requested to be based out of my hometown branch so I could both cover statewide work and be close to my roots. They agreed. Eventually, I bought a house there, which allowed me to have my own space without constantly crashing at my parents' place whenever I came home. 4 years passed. One Friday, after returning from a work trip, I was catching up on tasks in my office when Harry, the branch director, stopped by. We had grown up in the same town, though at different schools, and after my return, we became close friends. He invited me to a party at his place that evening. It was last minute, but I agreed. I felt like I needed a night with friends. That night, Harry introduced me to Catherine, a new employee who had just relocated to the area. We clicked instantly. As cliché as it sounds, she reminded me so much of Rachel it was uncanny.
2 years of dating later, Catherine moved into my home. Everything was going well. She got along with my parents, Rachel's family approved of her, and for nearly a year, life felt normal again. Then things started to shift. Our video calls during my trips became shorter. Neighbors mentioned seeing a car, one that matched Harry's, parked behind my house when I was away. I even noticed clothing in the closet that wasn't mine. Every sign pointed to betrayal, but when I confronted her, Catherine insisted it was innocent. She claimed Harry occasionally stopped by to discuss work matters and never stayed the night. I convinced myself I was just paranoid and tried to move on, though deep down the doubt lingered. 6 months later, the truth hit me in the face. I had just closed a major deal and the negotiations wrapped up earlier than expected. Instead of staying out of town, I booked an earlier flight home, wanting to surprise Catherine. A few hours later, I arrived in my hometown. Rather than pulling into the driveway, I parked in the alley behind the house, hoping to sneak in and give her a happy surprise. But part of me wanted to see if that mystery car was really there. And sure enough, it was. Parked directly at the back entrance was Harry's car. My stomach sank. For a split second, I hoped maybe it belonged to someone else, a careless neighbor perhaps, but the license plate confirmed it was his. My pulse skyrocketed as I stepped out, walking toward the rear of the house. And that's when I saw something that made my heart plummet. Time froze when I walked into my own kitchen and saw my closest friend having sex with my girlfriend on the counter. My mind went blank. 1,000 questions swirled inside me. Was this real? Was I dreaming? Why were they doing this in my house of all places? Shattered, I turned and slipped away unnoticed. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, tears running down my face. But grief quickly gave way to rage, the same kind of fury I once felt toward the people responsible for Rachel's death. Only this time, I had no intention of using violence. I considered myself a pacifist, but I knew I could still ruin their lives in a different way. I reversed down the alley, far enough to keep Harry's car in sight, then drove back near the front gate where I could watch the house. I called Catherine. They were still going at it when her phone rang. I watched them pause, glance at the screen, and exchange looks when they saw my name. She hesitated but didn't pick up. Seconds later, they resumed. I dialed again. This time, she answered. I hung up immediately. Moments later, she called me back, asking why I was ringing so late. I told her I'd be home in 10 minutes and didn't want to scare her by showing up unexpectedly. She faked excitement, said she was glad I was coming home, and quickly ended the call, claiming she needed to change clothes. Not long after, Harry bolted out the gate half-dressed, leapt into his car, and sped off like the devil was chasing him. I couldn't help but smirk, knowing I had terrified them both into thinking they'd been caught. I waited a few minutes, then parked where Harry's car had been. The rest of the night went quietly. Once she was asleep, I slipped into my office at the end of the hall, wide awake. I needed a plan. My mother had always taught me to let karma do its work, but this time, karma was going to get some help. I decided to punish them separately, but destroy both of their lives. I knew Harry was into substances, nothing hardcore, but enough to ruin his career if exposed. I'd stumbled upon some powder and weed at his place once, though he tried to cover it up. I pretended not to notice then, but now it was exactly what I needed. I began contacting shady clients and made several purchases, building up a stash over a few weeks. Soon I had more than enough to execute my plan. A month later, I hosted a barbecue for friends, Harry included. Once I made sure he had drunk plenty, I convinced him to crash at my place. Early the next morning, I planted the stash and some of my personal belongings inside his car, the largest amount hidden under the spare tire compartment. I also slipped a smaller stash into his home later when I dropped him off too drunk to drive himself. Days later, I staged a burglary. I smashed the glass in my kitchen's back door and left it ajar before heading to the airport. When my plane landed, I had several messages waiting. one from my panicked mother who discovered the broken door and called the police, one from Catherine in tears, and one from local authorities asking me to return their call. I told the police I was away on business and would speak to them once I got back. In the meantime, I asked Catherine to stay at my parents' house until I returned, and arranged through my father to have a security company install cameras and an alarm system. When I came home, I acted the part, shocked, confused, and upset. How could this happen? Who would want to break into my home? After a police walkthrough confirmed missing personal items, I filed a report. The security rep then showed Catherine and me how the system worked. She nervously asked what to do if we wanted privacy while being intimate. He assured her it was a common question and showed how to disable cameras in certain areas. As I escorted him out, I asked him if he could also set up email alerts for whenever the cameras were switched off. He happily obliged. Perfect. All I had to do now was wait. Meanwhile, I quietly consulted a family lawyer. I needed to be absolutely certain that when the time came, I could legally walk away from Catherine without paying her a cent or splitting any property. Since I wasn't entirely sure whether Catherine and I could be considered common law partners, I wanted to make certain she'd never have a legal claim to anything that once belonged to Rachel and me. As Rachel's sole heir, the last thing I needed was a legal ambush. Thankfully, my lawyer assured me. Despite nearly 4 years of dating, Catherine and I hadn't lived together long enough to qualify as common-law spouses. On top of that, since I paid all the bills and she had never contributed toward rent, she had no financial or legal grounds to demand anything. To cover every possibility, though, he drafted what felt like a bulletproof document just in case she ever tried. The following week, my company offered me a promotion with a relocation back to the city. It meant leading a team, and more importantly, no more endless travel. The move would take about 6 weeks, plenty of time to collect the evidence I needed.
Back in my hometown, I set the final stage of my plan in motion. I asked Harry to approve a week off for Catherine in about 2 weeks' time. I told him I wanted to surprise her with a vacation before taking the biggest step of my life again. He jumped up, hugged me hard, congratulating me for being ready to commit once more. I hugged him back, though not for the reason he thought. He agreed to block off the week, and I asked him to keep it quiet so it would be a surprise. Of course, I knew word would spread in the office. That was part of my design. That evening, I told Catherine I'd booked her and 2 of her friends a week-long spa retreat, all expenses paid. She squealed with excitement, like a child let loose in a candy shop. I then told her I'd be busy in the city preparing for a big client meeting and would fly out, not returning until after she was already gone. She looked a little disappointed, but I assured her the surprise would be worth it when she came back. What I didn't tell her was that I had quietly arranged a 2-week getaway for myself on the other side of the country, both to enjoy a taste of freedom and to brace myself for the storm that was about to break. 2 Sundays later, I returned and drove past my house. Sure enough, Harry's car was there, just as it had been the first night I caught them. I parked a little farther away and checked the cameras. They were asleep in my bed. No shock there. I already had 2 weeks' worth of recordings of them together. That's when I made my first call. Pretending to be a concerned neighbor, I told the police there was a man loitering in his car behind my property, occasionally handing things through car windows and peering into my yard. I said I suspected he might be dealing or planning a break-in. I gave them his license plate and vehicle description. They promised to send someone. Then I phoned Catherine, saying I'd be home in 10 minutes. I reminded her that although she was flying out the next day, I wanted to surprise her now. Watching the footage later, I laughed at the chaos I'd set off. Within seconds, Harry bolted shirtless out the back door and scrambled into his car. I couldn't have scripted it better. As he sped off, a police cruiser turned down the alley and immediately began pursuit. Perfect timing. I parked, greeted a very flustered Catherine, and played the part of the loving partner. We did the usual couple routines, then she fell asleep. I, of course, stayed awake. The next day, a taxi came to take her and her friends to the airport.
Once they left, I waited a few hours, then called a friend in the moving business. I asked him to help me box up Catherine's belongings and put them into storage that Friday. He agreed. Later that day, the police called. They wanted me to come identify items seized from a suspect the night before, items that matched the list of stolen property I had reported. I smiled, realizing my setup for Harry was now in motion, and told them I'd come by soon. When I arrived, not all of my missing things had been found yet. They were likely still at his house, awaiting a full search. But it hardly mattered. In a town this small, gossip spreads faster than fire. Harry was already disgraced, and within days he was fired outright for drug possession and stolen goods. That same evening, the company's executives formally apologized to me on behalf of the firm. Afterward, I went to my parents' house and explained what had happened, leaving out a few of the uglier details, and told them, as well as Rachel's parents, that I'd accepted a promotion and was moving back to the city, but without Catherine. They were disappointed I hadn't confided in them sooner, but relieved to see I hadn't stooped to her level. They gave their blessing to my plan to simply vanish from her life. After a long night of drinks, laughter, and a few tears, I returned home. By Friday afternoon, after a grueling week of lining up cleaners, preparing the house for rental, and closing tasks at the local office, I packed up a few last items, stopped at my parents to say goodbye, and then made one final detour. Becky, one of Rachel's closest childhood friends, had been my quiet accomplice. She was the only person, aside from my lawyer, who knew the truth, though I spared her the details about Harry. Without her help, I couldn't have pulled things together so quickly. I handed her a large envelope containing everything: video evidence of Catherine's affair, a personal letter, and legal documents drafted by my attorney forbidding Catherine from contacting me. It also included instructions on how she could retrieve her belongings from the storage unit I had rented. Becky promised to deliver it when the time came. Then I drove back to the city. On Sunday morning, I woke to a flood of missed calls, voicemails, and angry texts. Catherine had cut her trip short after hearing something had happened back home, only to find an empty house with a "for rent" sign planted in the yard. In a panic, she rushed to my parents' house. They closed the door in her face. She called around frantically until finally reaching Becky and learned about the envelope. As expected, she didn't take it well. Soon the messages began pouring in, furious accusations that I'd set up Harry, threats, pleas, everything in between. I half expected her to show up at my door in the city, but she never did. Now, to answer the questions people always ask, what happened to Harry? He's facing a few months behind bars. Since it's his first offense, he'll likely serve less, but I don't regret it. He grew up with Rachel and I, knew exactly how shattered I had been after losing her, and still chose betrayal. The police already had plenty to work with. All I did was give them a reason to look closer. What about Catherine? She fancied herself a socialite. Her status meant everything to her, and exposure was the only thing she couldn't survive. Word of her affair spread quickly in a small town. Her reputation was destroyed, and last I heard, she'd moved to another state because she couldn't handle the fallout. Was it legal? Surprisingly, yes. I covered every base with my lawyer. I had every right to move her belongings into storage, to cut her off, and to disappear. Morally, I know it was cold. I dangled what she thought was the happiest moment of her life, only to turn it into ashes. But that was the point, to let her feel the collapse I had felt once before. And finally, to those who think I'm lying, chasing internet clout, or that I'm some kind of sociopath, believe what you want. Stories like mine could happen anywhere. And as for labels, well, in this day and age, who doesn't have a touch of madness in them? I threw out my pregnant sister-in-law's food. My brother and his wife, Laura, who's 7 months pregnant, have been staying with us for about a week while he interviews for a job in our city. My kids adore having their aunt and uncle around, and everything had been going smoothly. Yesterday, Laura went grocery shopping and came back with several bags. I thanked her, but told her it really wasn't necessary. Our kitchen is already stocked, and their company is more than enough. She said she wanted to buy food herself, and most of the items were things she was seriously craving. As I helped her unpack, I noticed almost everything contained peanuts. Cookies, crackers, peanut butter, even some kind of peanut-filled cake. My stomach dropped, because she knows my 8-year-old son has a severe peanut allergy. We don't keep anything with peanuts in the house. When he was younger, we had a medical emergency that nearly cost his life. Ever since then, peanuts are a hard no. I tried not to be rude, but I told her I wasn't comfortable having that stuff in my home. Laura insisted she'd be careful. She wouldn't eat it around him or the other kids. She'd clean up afterward, she promised. She said her pregnancy cravings were intense and she really needed these snacks. Look, I have 4 kids. I know pregnancy cravings can be weird. I personally never had any that extreme, but every woman is different. I explained everything to my son and told him not to touch her snacks or be near her when she ate them. Fine. Problem solved. Or so I thought. This morning, I went downstairs early to make breakfast. I opened the fridge and found strawberries covered in peanut butter sitting right on the shelf with no container. Next to them, an open jar of peanut butter with the lid barely hanging on, and a plate of cold, soggy peanut butter sandwiches because apparently she likes them that way. I was furious. I've read enough about airborne allergens to know this was not safe. I grabbed a trash bag and started dumping everything inside. Her food, our food, all of it. I didn't care. I planned to take the bag straight to a shelter and explain why I couldn't keep it. Laura walked in while I was still fuming and asked what I was doing. I didn't hide my anger. She immediately got defensive, saying I had no right to throw away her food, that her baby needed it, and that I was being cruel to a pregnant woman. I told her point blank that I didn't care. If she couldn't respect my rules or my child's safety, then her cravings were not my problem. My kid could die. She stormed upstairs, packed her things, came back down, grabbed the bag of food, and left in tears. My brother called about half an hour later during a break in his interview. He was upset with both of us, said everyone was overreacting and that our son was still perfectly fine. When my husband came home, I told him everything, and he immediately took my side. So, was I wrong? Before we move on to the update, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Honestly, I can understand both sides here. If I were the pregnant woman, I'd probably feel humiliated and confused too. Someone throwing away all the groceries I bought, including my own food, because of a few peanut butter snacks? I'd be annoyed. But I also fully understand the mom. You simply cannot risk your child's life just to satisfy someone else's cravings. The unborn baby doesn't need peanut butter. It's a craving, not a medical necessity. Looking at the situation logically, the mom was right to prioritize her son's safety. Severe allergies are no joke, and if airborne peanut particles are even a small possibility, she had to act. The pregnant woman showed a shocking level of carelessness. So what do you think? Whose side are you on? Update 1. As many commenters predicted, Laura immediately ran to my family to complain. To her credit, she didn't twist the story. She told it exactly as it happened. And my mother was furious. She called me out of breath like she'd sprinted a mile, right after giving Laura a long lecture and making sure my son was okay. I can only imagine what she said to her. Even my stepdad gave Laura one of his signature disapproving glares, the kind that could make a grown adult rethink their entire life. My brother came by later that evening to pick up his things. For some reason, Laura had only packed hers. He apologized for what happened and said he'd talk to her once she calmed down. According to him, she'd been crying non-stop ever since leaving my mom's place and now felt completely unwanted in our family. And of course, he blamed me for that. My husband stepped in and told him enough was enough, that Laura's feelings didn't outweigh what we had gone through and that she needed to stop acting like the victim. He pointed out that I'd been scrubbing the house from top to bottom for hours because of her stunt. Yes, I panicked a little and launched into a full deep clean, especially in the kitchen. My brother stormed out, saying we were impossible to reason with because we're both too stubborn. Now that I've calmed down, I do feel bad that Laura is hurt and feels unwelcome. That was never my intention. I'm actually considering apologizing, not for what I did, because I still believe I was right, but for how I reacted. I should never have agreed to let peanut products into the house in the first place, and I definitely could have handled the fridge situation more calmly.
Update 2. A lot of people asked for a continuation, so here it is. After my mom finished tearing into Laura and my brother yelled at me and my husband, I followed the advice many of you gave me and sent them both a long message. It came out messy and emotional, but I wrote about everything, how upsetting the situation was, how much their attitude hurt us, and that we were stepping back and limiting contact until we were ready to talk again. I sent the message the day after he grabbed his luggage and left. My brother left it on read without opening it, so I figured that was the end. But a couple days later, Laura called me. I hesitated, but curiosity won. At first she tried making small talk, but when she realized I wasn't in the mood, she got to the point. She apologized. She said she had no excuse other than blaming hormones and admitted she'd acted horribly. We ended up talking for a long time, and by the end of the conversation, I actually felt relieved, like maybe we could move past this. She also told me she still wanted us to come to her birthday. The celebration wouldn't be at a restaurant anymore. They spent more than expected on the hotel, just like everyone predicted, so she'd be hosting it at their house. I told her I'd discuss it with my husband. My brother later sent a message too, apologizing and saying he'd only been trying to defend her. My husband still felt it was too soon to reconcile, but he left the final decision to me, and honestly, I believed her apology. She had never behaved like that before, and she genuinely sounded embarrassed and remorseful. My sister, whom Laura also apologized to after my sister absolutely tore into her, and my parents were invited as well. But all the kids wanted to have a cousin sleepover instead of coming with us. After talking to my sister, we agreed that's what we'd do. Our usual babysitters are 16-year-old twin girls who live next door with their single mom. They're great, responsible, sweet, and have been helping us with the kids for over a year now, whenever my husband and I go on date nights. That matters for context. Since we were adding my sister's 2 kids to the group, I asked their mom if she could help the twins that evening. She agreed. So I called Laura and told her Richard and I would attend. When we arrived at their house, Laura met us at the door. We handed her the gift and stepped inside, but she looked a bit confused that the kids weren't with us. I reminded her that it was supposed to be an adults-only evening. The same thing happened when my sister and her husband showed up. Dinner was awkward. No matter how hard we tried to ease the tension, the conversation felt stiff. Still, I thought it was progress. Then Laura asked again why the kids hadn't come. She said she'd even cooked a special dish just for them. I hadn't mentioned the kids when confirming we'd attend, so I felt guilty, apologized, and thanked her for the thought. My sister jumped in and mentioned that the kids were having a cousin sleepover tonight, and she couldn't wait until our future nephew was old enough to join them. Laura smiled and said, "Oh, I'm sure he'll be best friends with his cousins, my kids and your stepkids." That irritated me instantly. In our family, nobody uses words like step or half about the kids, but I held my tongue for the sake of peace. My sister technically is my stepsister. I mentioned my stepdad in my first post. I usually just call him by his name, but he's been a father figure since I was 10. My sister shot Laura an offended look, and my brother nudged his wife quietly with a face that clearly said, "What are you doing?" We ate in tense silence for a few minutes, barely keeping conversation alive, until Laura asked again about the kids, specifically who was watching them if all 4 parents were sitting at the table. I told her that our neighbors, the mom and the twin daughters, were babysitting tonight. Laura burst out laughing and joked that those girls and their mother must be so incompetent that all 3 of them could barely handle my kids. For context, I have 4 children. Maybe I'm biased, but they're well behaved, just a little too energetic sometimes for me, and I'm the one who gave birth to them. Add my sister's 2 kids on top of that, and it becomes too much for a pair of 16-year-old girls, even for just a couple of hours.
We left at 7 p.m. and planned to be back by 11. It had nothing to do with the girls or their mom being bad babysitters. They're wonderful people, and my children adore them. Before I even opened my mouth, my own mother cut in. With a perfect smile, she said, "How sweet of you, Laura, to volunteer your expertise and babysit next time." Laura shut up. Dinner became even tenser after that. When we finished eating, Laura brought out dessert and my brother pulled a cake from the fridge. That's when I completely lost it. I stepped into the bathroom, and when I came back, I saw my husband holding my purse and practically dragging me out of the house. He looked furious. I was confused. Yes, dinner had been a disaster, but I still wanted to say goodbye and come up with a polite excuse. When he tried to physically push me outside, I knew something was very wrong. I pulled away from him and rushed back to the dining room. On the dessert table, the one Laura had proudly set, were peanut butter cupcakes, peanut butter pie, peanut butter cookies, peanut butter brownies, and the crown jewel, a peanut butter cake my brother had just carried in, staring at it in horror. Laura grinned and loudly announced to everyone, "It's my birthday. At least today I get to indulge myself. Help yourselves before she throws this out, too."
For a moment, I honestly thought my sister was going to attack her, and I can't say I was far from doing the same. All I could think about was how convinced Laura must be that my children would show up, and how she clearly planned this on purpose. I still felt guilty for allowing peanut products in that house the last time, and if my cousins hadn't been staying the night, my son could have been in deadly danger again. I snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed Laura by the head, turned her toward my brother, who looked too stunned to move, and shoved her face straight into the cake. I held her down while she flailed and said, "I hope you choke on your little indulgences," before letting go. Honestly, a part of me wanted to launch the pie at her as well, but I had already embarrassed myself enough. I told my brother I was done. With him, with his wife, with all of it. And if either of them tried contacting me or my family again, I'd file for a restraining order. My husband finally managed to get me out of the house. My sister followed with her husband while our parents stayed behind. I heard Laura screaming profanity after us, but my stepdad raised his voice, something he almost never does, and she went silent immediately. People joked in the comments of my first post about his death stare, but trust me, the man is usually calm as a stone. If he shows emotion, things have seriously gone off the rails. When we were kids, one frown from him was enough to make us understand we were in trouble. I haven't asked my mom what happened after. I can't handle another blow connected to my brother and his choices. I know this isn't the update anyone expected, but I'm done with both of them. My brother had to know. All of this happened under his roof. It breaks my heart that I won't see my nephew anymore, that my kids won't meet the cousin they were excited about, but better to grieve that than to bury my son. Don't spare me harsh words. I'm 32. I shouldn't have been so naive. And yes, I know my reaction was wrong. I'm already talking to my therapist, trying to deal with the guilt. Please don't judge too hard. I'm still shaken. I'm also considering family therapy for my kids to help them process losing an uncle and aunt who used to be a big part of their lives. And now, we move on to the next story. Tell me in the comments, was the narrator right in the end or not? Maybe she shouldn't have snapped so badly that she shoved her sister-in-law's face into a cake. But honestly, a part of me just wants to say, well done. That was pretty much the ultimate payback she could have delivered.
Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare, emotionally or financially. And the reason for all of it was my sister, Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me.
By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend, Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months, and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything. They just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day, hysterical, and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage, simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out. And just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mom threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me. They truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me too. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. And Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway, and when I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming. But slowly, I taught myself to move forward, with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career, and just last week, I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes. But the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée, Lisa, posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post, For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. He also admitted that since he blocked me back then, it felt strange to just pop back up in my life. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie. Pete admitted he was furious when he found out. Instead of thinking clearly, he blocked everyone in my family, including me. Looking back, he knows it was the wrong move, but at the time, anger clouded everything.
The email itself included screenshots of conversations between Hannah and Frank. Messages where they openly confessed their love, joked about how easy it was to fool Pete, and arranged secret meetups. Hannah had even signed off using her rarely mentioned middle name, something only a few people knew. There was no denying it. Reading those messages was surreal. For the first time in years, I had undeniable proof. Hannah had lied about everything. I eventually confronted Pete in person after realizing he was in Lisa's Facebook friends list. He admitted that Emily, my friend who had originally been accused, had told him her side years ago. He just never told me because he didn't want to stir things up again. He regretted it now, because if he had spoken up earlier, I could have cleared my name long ago. Still, he was willing to help me now. Pete and I agreed that Hannah's lies had destroyed enough lives, and neither of us wanted her manipulations to stand unchallenged any longer. The truth was clear. Hannah had weaponized her family's trust to protect herself, even if it meant sacrificing me. She dragged my name through the mud, convinced my parents to disown me, all to keep her own reputation intact while she pursued her affair. And for the first time in years, I had the evidence to finally set the record straight. I'm certain my sister never once tried to tell our parents the truth. Instead, she kept feeding them lies during the divorce, and they swallowed every word without hesitation. She knew that if our parents ever discovered she was the one who cheated, she'd be in serious trouble, and she just couldn't allow that. Well, now the truth is finally out, and I'm going to use it to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine all those years ago. I wasn't sure if my parents were still living in the same house, since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but an old neighbor confirmed they never moved. Even better, Hannah still lived there. That didn't surprise me at all. She was always lazy and hated responsibility. Living off aging parents while they did everything for her was exactly her style. 2 days ago, Pete and I showed up unannounced. My mom opened the door, and we pushed our way inside before she could react. My dad and Hannah were sitting in the living room, the happy family reunited, but only for a moment. Their faces twisted as soon as they saw us. My dad immediately started shouting, threatening to call the police if we didn't leave. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we brought. My parents looked confused, while Hannah turned pale and bolted to her room. I figured she was trying to avoid the inevitable, but there was no escaping it. Pete pulled out the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah's messages with Frank, while I explained the real story. Pete also revealed how Hannah had been forced to give up our grandmother's diamond heirloom ring to settle the divorce, since her teacher salary couldn't cover the payout. My parents were stunned. We sat there watching as the drama unfolded. My dad demanded answers from Hannah, but when she tried lying yet again, even with the evidence right in front of her, he'd had enough. He packed her belongings, shoved them into a bag, and kicked her out of the house on the spot. I didn't need to be told twice. Pete and I walked out together, leaving Hannah begging our parents to let her back in, exactly the way I had once begged them years ago. It was the sweetest revenge. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A couple days later, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding I fix things with our parents. I don't even know how she found my address, but I told her point blank that I owed her nothing. She ruined my life, and I simply returned the favor. We were even now. Apparently, she has no pride left, because the moment I said that, she broke down sobbing, calling me a monster. I honestly didn't care. I put on my headphones, turned up the music, and let Lisa keep working peacefully in her office. Eventually, she left, but not before scrawling a message on my door with a marker reminding me that I'm a vengeful monster. To be honest, I don't feel bad about what I did. I don't think I'm the villain here. I didn't lie or scheme like she did. I just exposed the truth. So, am I really the bad guy for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out of our parents' home 7 years after she blamed me for her divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Update 1. Hannah didn't stop bothering me. Even after a week, she kept calling nonstop, 14 times in a day. I finally threatened to involve the police, and that made her back off, at least for now. I have no idea how she keeps getting my number after I block her, but apparently she has her friends add me into group calls from different numbers. She's tried guilt-tripping me, saying her teacher salary isn't enough to live on. But I know that's not the real issue. What she really hates is finally having to pay rent, utilities, and groceries herself. And honestly, that's not my problem. As for my parents, they're not much better. They found me on Facebook after seeing Lisa's engagement post. Now they're suddenly interested in being part of my life again. They even hinted that they expect to be invited to my wedding. They still haven't apologized, but somehow think they deserve to show up on one of the most important days of my life. Lisa and I laughed reading their messages because they were so delusional it almost seemed like a bad joke. But in truth, the whole thing is more sad than funny.
Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was getting ready to leave for work, but she stopped me by flopping onto the hood of my car, refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was incredibly annoying, and this time I actually called the police. They took her away while she screamed and cried, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Unfortunately for her, nobody bought it. It took some time to file the official report against her, but as soon as I did, I rushed to work so this incident wouldn't ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out since she's their favorite, and I was right. They sent her home and then followed up with a long message telling me I had been too harsh and unfair to them over a mistake they supposedly made almost 10 years ago. It was laughable. Nothing my sister and parents did to me back then could ever be called merciful or fair. No mercy stopped them from literally throwing me out of the house with nowhere to go. So now, I see no reason to offer forgiveness or kindness. I messaged my parents saying that after all these years, they had lost any right to tell me what I can or cannot do, and that they should stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet, had to check the message first, but I will soon. Hopefully then, I can finally cut that whole family out of my life for good. Update 3. I just got home from work, checked my socials, and saw that my parents sent me another long message. Lisa and I read it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. These poor people don't realize that nothing they say or do now can hurt me. I just laughed at how pathetic they are. They still think we're a family, and announced they'd taken Hannah back, claiming both of their children deserve a second chance, as if I was ever in the wrong. They expected Lisa and me to visit them for dinner before my wedding to civilly resolve our differences. Too bold of them to assume I'd ever want them anywhere near my wedding. We laughed at their absurd message, and I responded that I had zero interest in any invitations from them. I'm perfectly happy living my life without them, just like I have for the last 7 years. They made it clear long ago that I'm better off without them. I'm grateful it took me so long to realize that. I no longer need them or their so-called forgiveness. They can continue playing happy family with Hannah all they want. I don't care. After sending that last message, I blocked them permanently. That's it. I'm done. I'm sure they'll try to contact me again somehow, but it doesn't matter. Lisa is the only family I need, and I'm happier than I've ever been with just her. My parents and sister never could see past their own noses, and I doubt they ever will. Next time they try to reach out, they'll be talking to my lawyer.
My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome, but my parents forced me to hand it over to my golden child's sister. She ended up crashing on the way to the airport, so I took my ticket back and went anyway. Hi, I'm 18, and for my birthday, my grandparents on my dad's side gifted me a plane ticket to Rome plus a check for travel expenses. I was beyond excited, but the very next day, my parents started pressuring me to be selfless and give the trip to my older sister, June. She's 21 and the golden child of the family, if that wasn't already obvious. Their excuse? June is studying architecture, and seeing Rome in person would be an amazing opportunity for her resume and her language skills. I pointed out that I'm going into literature, and Rome would be just as valuable for me, but they didn't care. The kicker? June had already been given the same choice at 18. Grandparents offered her a trip abroad, but she turned it down and asked for cash instead. My turn finally came, and suddenly I'm not allowed to enjoy it. For weeks, the arguments dragged on. My parents guilt-tripped me, listing every sacrifice they've made for me, calling it a small favor to give up this trip. I resisted at first, until one day they slipped up and said they didn't want the trip wasted on me. That broke me. Basically, if I went, it was worthless, but if June went, it mattered. They tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Eventually, I gave in and said, fine, whatever. I figured there was no way the airline would even allow them to change the ticket, so I still had my check at least. But somehow, they pulled strings. On the day of the flight, June showed up with my boarding pass and headed to the airport instead. And then, karma hit. On the way, we got a call. June had been in a car accident. Apparently, she grabbed the steering wheel of the taxi because she thought the driver was taking the wrong route. The car spun out and hit a tree. June walked away with scratches, but the poor driver took the full impact. Broken arm, deep head gash, hospitalized. He's suing her now, and my parents are panicking, trying to cover the damages with their savings. When they told me what happened, I snapped. The words just slipped out. That's karma for forcing me to give up Rome. They were horrified, told me I was heartless, that words carry weight, and now they finally saw my true selfish nature. Hypocrisy much? They literally told me my trip would be wasted if I went, but apparently that wasn't cruel. Furious, I grabbed a small bag, ordered a taxi, and headed to the hospital myself. I realized in that moment, no matter what I did, my family would never see me as worthy or equal, so why keep sacrificing for them? When I arrived, June was busy spinning her version of the accident to the cops, trying to claim it wasn't her fault. I didn't even bother arguing. I just walked up and asked her one thing. Do you still have my boarding pass? Update. My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome. My parents forced me to give it to my golden child's sister. She crashed on the way to the airport, and I ended up taking the ticket back and flying anyway. So, yeah, here's what happened next. When I confronted June at the hospital, she looked completely stunned and confused. I didn't even wait for her to respond. I grabbed her bag, dug through it, and found my boarding pass. Without another word, I bolted out, jumped into the taxi, and rushed straight to the airport. I barely made it in time, but somehow, against all odds,
I ended up on the plane, and then it hit me. I was actually flying to Rome. I didn't check my phone until I landed, and wow, my family is furious. My parents think I'm a heartless monster because, in their words, I abandoned my sister after the accident. The accident she caused herself, might I add. June is pissed because she claims I stole her chance, when in reality, she stole mine first. All I did was take back what was mine to begin with. Apparently, the family consensus is that I was wrong and owe everyone an apology. June even texted me that her parents are draining their savings to pay off the taxi driver who's suing her for damages, and that I should be helpful by handing over the birthday check my grandparents gave me. According to her, I'm selfish for traveling while the family is suffering. But honestly, I don't think I owe anyone anything. To answer some of the questions people had, the boarding pass issue. I'm 99% sure my parents never actually figured out how to legally transfer the ticket. June probably just planned to show up and bluff her way through security. If they'd really switched the booking, I wouldn't have been able to board with my passport. So their plan was just smoke and mirrors, and it backfired. Why I still live at home? It's complicated. I grew up believing that if I just tried harder, my parents would eventually treat me like they treat June. I spent 18 years trying to earn their love, never realizing how toxic that mindset was. Moving in with my grandparents never seemed like an option. They live far out of town, and honestly, I thought keeping the peace with my parents was my best shot. Spoiler, it wasn't. But now I'm realizing I don't have to live like this anymore. My relationship with June? We've never been close. I don't hate her, she doesn't hate me, we just don't get along. She's always been controlling, the kind of person who had to sit in the front seat even on family trips. So of course she tried to take the wheel from the taxi driver because she thought she knew the faster route. That's exactly the kind of thing she does. And yes, my parents aren't doing great financially. Mom's a nurse, dad's a high school football coach. They rely heavily on my grandparents' help. Now, with this lawsuit hanging over them, they're in real trouble. If they want financial help from my grandparents, they'll have to admit what actually happened, which I doubt they're eager to do.
Update number 1. I've had a couple of days to think it over, and honestly, I've decided not to waste this trip worrying about my parents or June. This is probably the last chance I'll get for years. Once I start college, I won't have this kind of freedom again. So I'm going to enjoy Rome. My sister made her choices, my parents made theirs. For once in my life, I'm choosing me. Update number 2. My Rome trip changed everything. Now I live with my grandparents. They're adults and they can deal with their own mess. It's not my fault they tried to take something that was never theirs to begin with and ended up facing the consequences. You guys were right. It was foolish of me to ever expect them to appreciate my sacrifice. They'll always resent me no matter what I do. So why should I keep giving up my happiness for them? Right now, I'm having the best time of my life in Rome. This morning, I finally opened up to my grandparents about everything. How my parents have treated me all these years, how they've always put June first, and how I was constantly overlooked. Even my closest friends never knew the full story. So telling my grandparents felt like a huge weight lifted off my chest. They were shocked that it had gone on for so long and that I kept quiet. I told them I always thought if I just stay quiet and keep trying to be the perfect daughter, eventually my parents will love me too. But now I finally understand. That day will never come. My grandparents told me I did the right thing. They insisted that when I come back from Rome, I should go straight to their house instead of my parents'. They said they'll make all the arrangements for me to move in with them. When I reminded them that I'll be starting college in the fall, they smiled and said that's not a problem. They'll cover all my expenses themselves. That one conversation literally changed my life.
For the first time, I know where I'll belong when I return. My parents are furious, of course. They never planned to pay for my college anyway. They had told me from the start that, since they already paid for June's education, I was on my own. But now it doesn't matter. I'll be okay. Update number 3. My trip ended a few days ago, and I'm officially living with my grandparents. When I got back, I went straight to their house, and to my surprise, they had already prepared a guest room for me and even hired movers to bring all my things from my parents' place. They welcomed me so warmly, I almost cried. They told me what happened after our phone call. Apparently, the night of June's accident, my parents had called my grandparents asking for help. They didn't want to dip into their own savings or risk a lawsuit, especially since the dashcam footage clearly showed June was at fault. The only way out was a settlement, but the taxi driver was asking for a huge sum. When they all met, my grandparents first asked my parents about me, whether it was true they had always treated me unfairly and even forced me to give up my Rome trip. My parents tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't the time to discuss me since I was off partying in Rome. But my grandparents pressed, and eventually my parents snapped and admitted everything. They said yes, it was true, but claimed I deserved it, because I abandoned the family when things got hard. They accused me of showing up at the hospital only to snatch the boarding pass, not caring about June. They even said I'd always been jealous because June was better at everything. Then they called me spoiled and selfish, and told my grandparents that when I returned, they wouldn't tolerate me anymore. That was the final straw. My grandparents cut ties with them on the spot. My parents told them if they wanted to take me in, then fine, because they were done with me anyway. Hearing all this broke my heart. Deep down, I always knew my parents didn't care about me, but having them outright say it, that hurt more than I can describe. I cried so much that night. But through it all, my grandparents stood by me. They've shown me what family is supposed to feel like. For the first time in my life, I finally feel safe. This is my home now until I leave for college in a couple of months. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. Update number 4. My grandparents completely changed my life, and my parents got a reality check. When I leave for college, I won't have to worry about a thing. My grandparents are covering all my expenses. Since returning, I haven't spoken to my parents or June at all. I didn't even read their last messages because I wanted to just enjoy my trip. June's messages were all the same, calling me selfish, spoiled, worthless, and saying she's glad she doesn't have to deal with me anymore because I'm unworthy of her company. Honestly, I think she got it backwards. She's the one unworthy of mine. But I really don't care. The words that hurt most come from my parents, though even their words no longer surprise me.
They sent messages accusing me of being heartless, saying they should have stopped me at the hospital, claiming it was their fault for not raising me properly, and pointing out that even at the hospital, I escaped to go on the trip. They kept repeating things like, "We did everything to give you a comfortable life." Comfortable life doesn't equal good childhood, I thought. Sure, they fed me, clothed me, and put a roof over my head, but that doesn't erase years of neglect, favoritism, and emotional harm. They said I complained out of jealousy of June, and therefore calling them villains was unfair. Then they concluded by calling me a void, saying I wasted their time and energy, and now they're finally happy without me. It stung, and I nearly cried. But after talking with my grandparents, I promised myself I would no longer let their cruel words break me. I blocked my parents, cutting off all contact. I need to start healing and maybe erase their toxic influence from my mind. I don't know if I can do it completely, but I will try. The funniest, most insane part happened today. It's been almost 2 weeks since I returned from Rome. I had no clue what was going on with my parents or June. I assumed they were still scrambling money for the taxi settlement. But today, out of nowhere, my parents showed up at my grandparents' house, clearly ready for revenge. Thankfully, they didn't even acknowledge me. They went straight to the living room where my grandparents were. I froze, unsure what to do, but my grandparents told me to sit with them. They could see the looks on my parents' faces, annoyance, anger, but nothing was said out loud. When my grandparents asked why they had come, The parents said they still expected compensation for all the money they supposedly spent on me over the years. They pulled out documents claiming I owed them almost $120,000 for raising me. I was floored. The audacity. These were the people who had done the bare minimum, and now they were trying to profit off of it? My grandparents calmly asked to speak privately, leaving me out. After a few tense minutes, they came back and said they were willing to pay, but only if my parents returned all the money they had borrowed from my grandparents over the years. That was it. My parents were completely blindsided, and I couldn't stop laughing. Eventually, they shouted, slammed the door, and left. I don't think they'll be back anytime soon, and honestly, it doesn't matter. My grandparents have proven they can handle them, and my father being their only son doesn't change anything. I leave for college in a few months, and for the first time in my life, I'm genuinely excited. Looking back, going to Rome was probably the best decision I've ever made. It not only gave me an amazing trip, but also helped me finally claim my life and freedom.